Listen to the rain, falling softly against the heavy canvas, a gentle rhythm in the deep of the night. It is early June, and the southern edge of England lies wrapped in a cool, damp blanket of mist. Beneath the ancient oak trees and across the rolling green meadows, a sprawling, temporary city has grown quietly in the shadows. Here, under the dripping branches, thousands of young men wait. They are boys from dusty farms, from quiet coastal towns, from bustling city streets an ocean away, now gathered in the hushed embrace of the English countryside. The world knows what is coming, the history books will record the grand sweep of it, but in this moment, there are no grand speeches. There is only the rain, the soft breathing of the man sleeping on the cot beside you, and the heavy, lingering twilight. Step inside one of these tents. The air is thick with the comforting sense of damp wool, heavy canvas, and the faint, sweet smoke of a single, shared cigarette. A lantern hangs from the center pole, casting a warm, golden pool of light onto a makeshift wooden table below. In this soft, amber glow, faces look younger than they are. They are tired, not from marching, but from the immense, invisible weight of the wait. Waiting is a quiet thief. It steals your focus, leaving only memories and thoughts of home in its place. A young man sits at the edge of his cot, a pad of paper resting on his knee. He holds a fountain pen, the ink dark and absolute against the pale blue lines of the paper. What do you write, when tomorrow holds the edge of the world? He does not write of strategy. He does not write of the vast armadas gathering in the harbors, or the great steel machines waiting in the mud. He writes about the garden back home. He asks if the tomatoes have started to come in yet. He tells his mother not to worry, that the food is fine, that he is keeping his feet warm and dry. It is a gentle deception, a shield woven from ordinary things, meant to protect the ones he loves from the cold reality of the channel. Across the tent, another soldier is folding a photograph into the breast pocket of his tunic. It is creased at the edges, worn soft by 1,000 touches. A girl in a summer dress, standing on a porch, smiling into the sun. He presses it against his chest, right over his heart, a paper armor forged in love. These pieces of paper, covered in hurried, slanted handwriting, are anchors. They tie these drifting souls back to a world of Sunday dinners, front porch swings, and warm, safe beds. There is a profound silence here, but it is not empty. It is filled with the unspoken language of brothers. A boy from the mountains of Tennessee looks across the dim light at a boy from the busy streets of New York. They do not need to speak. One reaches into his pack, pulls out a small, foil-wrapped square of chocolate, breaks it perfectly in half, and passes it across the narrow space between them. A simple nod is exchanged. This is the currency of the night before the storm. Small, quiet acts of grace. A hand reaching out to steady a trembling shoulder. A whispered joke that isn't really funny, but brings a soft, shared smile anyway, simply because it breaks the tension. They are strangers brought together by the currents of time, but tonight, beneath the rhythmic patter of the rain, they are everything to one another. They are the keepers of each other's fears. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, rustling the wet leaves of the birch trees. The air smells of salt and wet earth. Just a few miles away, the English Channel churns in the dark, a cold and restless stretch of gray water. It is the Great Barrier. They can almost hear it, out there in the blackness, a low, constant murmur beneath the sound of the rain. Some of the men step out of the tents, pulling their collars up against the damp chill. They stand in the shadows, looking south toward the unseen water. What does a man feel in that quiet dark? It is a complex tapestry of emotion. There is fear, of course. A natural, deeply human fear of the unknown, of the sheer scale of the dawn that approaches. But woven alongside that fear is a quiet, surprising resilience. It is not the loud, boastful courage found in storybooks. It is a soft, enduring strength. It is the simple decision to stay standing, to pack the rucksack, to check the laces on the heavy leather boots one more time. It is the profound courage of ordinary men facing the extraordinary, finding footing in the mundane tasks of preparation. Back inside the tent, the lantern is turned down low. The golden light fades to a soft, glowing ember. Shadows stretch long and comforting across the canvas walls. The men lay back on their low cots, pulling the rough, scratchy blankets up to their chins. The camp is settling into a restless slumber. Sleep, when it comes, is fragile. It is interrupted by the distant, muffled sound of a jeep driving down a muddy lane, or the sudden, sharp call of a night bird in the trees. In the dark, thoughts drift untethered. They drift back to the smell of fresh coffee in a sunny kitchen, to the sound of a dog barking in the yard, to the feeling of a warm hand slipped into theirs on a cool autumn walk. These memories are vivid, painted in bright, vibrant colors that contrast sharply with the olive drab and gray of their present world. They wrap themselves in these memories. They use them as blankets against the chill of the coming morning. Time slows down in the dark. An hour stretches out, feeling like an eternity, while the minutes slip through their fingers like dry sand. Moving softly through the rows of tents is a lone figure. A chaplain, his collar turned up against the drizzle, walks the muddy paths. He does not preach tonight. He simply walks, a silent guardian in the mist. Occasionally, he pauses by a tent flap, listening to the quiet murmurs inside. Sometimes, a soldier steps out to meet him in the rain. A quiet word is exchanged, a hand is placed gently on a bowed shoulder, a blessing is whispered into the wind. It does not matter what name they call the divine. Tonight, the comfort is in the presence, in the shared humanity, in the knowledge that they are not entirely alone in the dark. The chaplain moves on, his silhouette fading into the fog, leaving behind a small, lingering trail of peace. Let us stay here a little longer, in this quiet sanctuary of the English night. Feel the gentle, rhythmic sway of the canvas as the wind breathes against it. Notice the small details that anchor these men to the earth. The carefully polished brass of a compass, cool to the touch. The worn, smooth wood of a lucky charm tucked deep into a pocket, its edges rounded by nervous thumbs. The slow, rhythmic ticking of a wristwatch, counting away the seconds in the dark. Each tick is a footstep toward the shoreline. Yet, there is a strange beauty in this suspension of time. The world has narrowed down to the space inside this tent, to the warmth of the blanket, to the steady, rising and falling breath of the men around them. Tomorrow will demand everything. Tomorrow will be loud, and chaotic, and demanding. But right now, in this hidden sliver of time, nothing is asked of them but to simply be. They are suspended between the lives they knew and the history they are about to make. In the corner, the young man with the fountain pen has finished his letter. He folds it carefully, ensuring the edges meet perfectly. He slips it into an envelope, smooths down the flap, and seals it tight. He writes the address with a slow, deliberate hand. An address in a quiet valley. Or perhaps a busy street lined with brick houses. He sets the envelope on top of his pack. It sits there, a small white rectangle in the gloom, holding within it a universe of love, of longing, of silent promises. It is a piece of himself, left behind to speak for him, should the silence claim him tomorrow. He lies back, his hands folded across his chest. He stares up at the sloping canvas ceiling, though he cannot see it in the dark. He traces the unseen lines of the seams with his eyes. He is ready. Not without fear, but with a quiet, solemn acceptance that settles over him like the soft dust falling from the tent roof. The rain continues to fall. It is a forgiving sound. It washes away the dust of the day, it softens the hard edges of the world. It is a lullaby sung by the earth to her children. In the neighboring cots, breathing grows deeper, more rhythmic. Dreams, gentle and sweet, begin to replace the waking anxieties. Let them sleep. Let them wander through fields of tall grass back home. Let them sit on front porches in the summer evening. Let them hold the hands of the ones they love in the quiet spaces of their minds. The shadows on the channel are deep, and the water waiting in the distance is cold, but here, under the dripping oaks, there is only the soft rustle of the leaves and the steady heartbeat of thousands of boys, resting in the palm of history. The night stretches on, a dark, protective blanket drawn over the waiting world. The dawn will come, and with it, the turning of the tide. But for now, there is only the rain, the sheltering canvas, and the beautiful, unbroken quiet. Feel the slow, deep breath of the ocean rising beneath a floor of cold steel. The land has slipped away, leaving only the vast, dark expanse of the English Channel. Out here, the world is reduced to the rhythmic rise and fall of the water, a gentle, swaying motion that rocks the great transport ships as they press forward into the night. It is a midnight armada, a silent procession of shadows moving across the face of the deep. There are no lights on the deck, no stars breaking through the heavy canopy of clouds above. The ships move like phantoms, guided by the unseen currents and the quiet, collective resolve of the men carried within them. Down in the belly of the vessel, beneath the waterline, the air is thick and warm. It smells of heavy wool uniforms, damp canvas webbing, the metallic tang of sea salt, and the faint, reassuring scent of engine oil. The space is dimly lit by a few small, caged bulbs that cast a soft, red glow over the rows of waiting men. It is a crimson twilight, hiding the paleness of anxious faces and turning the cramped hold into a quiet sanctuary. Here, the men sit shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee, packed closely together on hard wooden benches. In this tight space, there is no room for distance. The physical closeness becomes a profound source of comfort. When the ship pitches gently over a dark swell, they lean into one another, a single, living entity breathing in the dim light. They feel the warmth of the man sitting next to them, a reassuring reminder that they are not making this crossing alone. Beneath them, the ship's engine maintains a low, steady thrum. It is a constant, rhythmic vibration that travels up through the steel floorboards, through the thick leather of their boots, and settles deep in their chests. It feels almost like a heartbeat. Thump. 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 A steady, mechanical pulse carrying them toward the dawn. Many of the boys close their eyes and let the vibration lull them, imagining it is the familiar rumble of a train carrying them back to their hometowns, or the hum of a tractor working a wide, open field under a summer sun. In the shadows, voices murmur. They do not speak of the beaches. They do not speak of the morning. Instead, they trade in the currency of everyday miracles. They whisper memories into the humid air, keeping them alive, keeping them close. A boy from a dusty town in the Midwest leans his head back against the cold steel bulkhead. He speaks softly to the friend pressed against his right side. He describes, in vivid, loving detail, the smell of his mother's kitchen on a Sunday afternoon. He talks about the way the flour would dust the wooden counter, the sound of the screen door slapping shut in the wind, the sweet, heavy scent of apples and cinnamon baking in the oven. His friend listens, his eyes closed, nodding slowly. In the damp, metallic belly of the ship, that kitchen becomes real for both of them. It is a shared shelter, built of words and memory, a place to hide from the cold spray of the channel. Across the narrow aisle, another soldier is turning something over and over in his hands. It is a smooth, worn stone he picked up from the creek behind his house before he left. His thumb traces the familiar grooves and indentations, a tactile connection to the earth he knows. It holds the warmth of his hand, a small, solid piece of home crossing the dark water with him. Beside him, a young man quietly slides a set of wooden beads through his fingers. His lips barely move as he recites an ancient, whispered prayer. He does not pray for glory. He prays for the water to remain calm. He prays for the sun to rise warmly. He prays for the stranger sitting across from him, whose name he barely knows, but whose face he will never forget. The rocking of the ship is hypnotic. Up and down, side to side. It is a slow, methodical cradle. For some, it brings a heavy, dizzying nausea, a physical manifestation of the waiting. But even in this, there is a quiet tenderness. When a young soldier leans forward, pale and shaking, the man beside him, perhaps older, perhaps just kinder, places a firm, steadying hand on the back of his neck. He offers a canteen, the water inside lukewarm and tasting of tin, but it is given with a gentleness that transcends words. "Take a sip," he whispers. "Just breathe with the water. You're all right. I've got you." It is a small act of everyday heroism, the quiet grace of holding someone up when the world feels unsteady. Time loses its shape in the hold of the ship. The hours stretch and blend together, measured only by the endless rise and fall of the waves. It is a state of suspension. They are no longer the boys they were when they left the shores of home, and they are not yet the men who will step onto the sand. They exist in the spaces between, floating in the dark. Some of the men try to sleep. They fold their arms across their chests, tucking their chins down into the rough collars of their jackets. Their breathing slows, joining the collective rhythm of the hold. In their sleep, the tension leaves their faces. They look incredibly young. The dim red light softens their features, washing away the dirt and the exhaustion, leaving only innocence. To look at them is to see 1,000 quiet futures, 1,000 unwritten stories resting gently in the belly of the ship. Above them, on the open deck, the wind blows cold and wet. The spray from the bow cutting through the waves mists the air. If you were to stand up there and look out, you would see nothing but shadows upon shadows. But you would feel the immense, quiet power of the fleet moving together. Thousands of vessels, carrying hundreds of thousands of souls, all moving in the same direction, bound by the same invisible thread. It is a community of ships, a floating city traveling through the night, carrying the hopes of a fractured world. But down below, the world remains beautifully small. It is just the steady hum of the engine, the rocking of the water, and the soft whispers in the dark. Someone strikes a match. The sudden flare of yellow light briefly pushes back the red gloom. A cigarette is lit, the smoke inhaled deeply and then exhaled in a slow, gray plume that hangs in the humid air. The cigarette is passed down the line. 2 fingers touch. A silent nod of thanks. The tiny glowing ember moves from hand to hand, a shared point of warmth, a communal ritual that grounds them in the present moment. It is a taste of normalcy in a profoundly abnormal world. Think of the bravery it takes simply to sit in the dark and wait. It is easy to be swept up in the momentum of action, to let adrenaline carry you forward. But to sit still, in the cramped, swaying hold of a ship, listening to the water rush past the steel hull, knowing what awaits where the water meets the land, that requires a different, deeper kind of strength. It is a quiet resilience, forged in patience and sustained by love. It is the strength of a boy writing a letter in his mind, tracing the words he will say when he finally returns to the front porch of his home. The night wears on. The whispers begin to fade, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic breathing of men drifting into a restless slumber. The stories of home have been told, the memories shared, the small comforts exchanged. Now, there is only the waiting. Listen to the water. It slaps gently against the side of the transport, a continuous, soothing sound. It is a lullaby as old as the world itself. The sea does not know of the wars of men. It only knows the pull of the moon and the sweep of the wind. Its ancient, rhythmic motion cradles the steel ships, rocking them softly as they move through the blackness. In the dim light, a soldier reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, creased photograph. He does not need to look at it. He has memorized every line, every shadow of the face smiling back at him. He holds it tightly in his palm, pressing it against his leg. It is a silent promise. A vow made to the dark water and the hum of the engine. I will remember. The ship rises on a large swell, seeming to hang in the air for a fraction of a second, before settling gently back down into the trough. The men sway with it, leaning together, a forest of shoulders and helmets moving in unison. They are a brotherhood bound not by rank or duty, but by the shared experience of this midnight crossing. Let the sound of the engine wash over you. Let the gentle pitching of the ship rock your thoughts to stillness. The channel is wide, and the night is deep, but inside this vessel, there is a profound and beautiful humanity holding back the dark. The dawn is still hours away, hidden somewhere beyond the horizon. For now, there is only the comforting sway of the ocean, the steady beat of the engine, and the quiet, collective breath of boys dreaming of home as they sail softly into the unknown. Step out into the rushing wind, and suddenly, the roaring world falls completely silent. Just moments ago, the air was filled with the deafening hum of heavy engines, the rattling of metal, and the tense, collective breath of 24 young men sitting shoulder to shoulder in the dark. But then, the doorway opened. A square of endless, dark sky appeared, framed in steel. And one by one, they stepped out into the void. There is a sudden, sharp rush of cold air against warm cheeks. A brief, heart-stopping moment of tumbling through the vast emptiness. And then, a firm, upward pull. Above them, in the dark, a massive canopy of silk blooms open, catching the night wind with a sound like a heavy sail snapping taut on a quiet sea. Suddenly, the breathless falling becomes a gentle, swaying drift. It is incredibly, profoundly quiet up here. The chaotic world of the metal plains rushes away into the distance, leaving these men suspended in the soft, silver light of the moon. They are floating between the stars and the earth, drifting like dandelion seeds on a gentle summer breeze. In this fleeting, suspended moment, there is no war. There is only the sky, the wind, and the slow, peaceful descent toward a sleeping continent. Look up at the parachute catching the moonlight. It glows faintly, a giant, protective dome of pale silk. For a boy named William, from a windy farm in the Dakotas, looking up at that white fabric stretching against the dark sky brings a sudden, vivid memory of home. It looks exactly like the crisp, white bedsheets his mother used to shake out over the clothesline in the backyard, snapping them in the spring wind before letting them billow and dance. He can almost smell the soap and the sunshine in the fabric. He holds onto the heavy canvas risers of his parachute, his leather-gloved hands gripping them tightly, and he closes his eyes for just a second. He lets the memory wrap around him, a warm embrace in the freezing upper air. Below them, the French countryside reveals itself in the starlight. It is a beautiful, sleeping patchwork quilt of dark greens and grays. Silver ribbons of rivers weave slowly through quiet valleys. The ancient, thick hedgerows look like dark veins stretching across the gentle hills. It is peaceful. The farms are dark and still, tucked into the folds of the earth. To the boys drifting down from the heavens, it does not look like a battlefield. It looks like the rural valleys of Pennsylvania, or the quiet, rolling pastures of ordinary homes left behind. As they drift closer to the earth, the wind whispers through the suspension lines of the parachute. It is a soft, melodic hum. They can see the tops of the apple trees now. They can see the damp, silver dew resting on the tall grass of the meadows. The ground rushes up to meet them, dark and solid. There is a rustle of leaves, the heavy thud of leather boots against soft soil, and the gentle collapse of the silk canopy as it falls to the earth, sighing as it deflates in the dew-soaked grass. Then, the true silence begins. When a man lands in the dark, releasing himself from the heavy harness that carried him down, the first thing he notices is the overwhelming, profound isolation. Just minutes ago, he was surrounded by his brothers. Now, he is entirely alone in a foreign field, cloaked in shadows. A young soldier kneels in the damp clover. He presses his hands into the soft earth. The soil of Normandy smells exactly like the soil of Ohio after a heavy rain. It is rich, earthy, and deep. He runs his fingers through the wet grass, grounding himself. He is breathing hard, his heart beating a rapid, nervous rhythm against his ribs. He unclips his helmet, just for a moment, to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead. The night air is cool and smells faintly of sea salt from the distant channel, mixed with the sweet, tart scent of crushed apples from the orchard where he has landed. He stands up slowly, staying low to the ground. He gathers his parachute, burying the white silk beneath a pile of brush so it will not catch the morning light. It feels almost like hiding a ghost. Now, he must walk. He must move through the shadows and find the others. The Normandy countryside is a labyrinth in the dark. The fields are bordered by massive, ancient hedgerows, thick walls of tangled roots, earth, and thorny bushes that have stood for centuries. They cast long, deep black shadows under the moonlight. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a dry twig underfoot, sounds impossibly loud in the heavy silence. The solitude is heavy. It presses against the chest. It is a deeply human vulnerability to be entirely alone in the dark, separated from the flock. These boys were not trained to fight as solitary warriors. They were trained to lean on the man to their left and the man to their right. Without them, the night feels vast and overwhelming. He moves slowly, quietly, keeping his back against the rough bark of the apple trees. He stops every few paces to simply listen. He hears the wind moving through the canopy of leaves. He hears the distant, rhythmic chirping of a cricket in the tall grass. He thinks of the letter folded perfectly in his left breast pocket, written to his younger sister. He had promised her he would bring her back a ribbon from Paris. He touches the pocket, feeling the crisp edge of the paper through the thick wool of his uniform. It is a tiny, fragile anchor holding him steady in the swirling dark. Then, he hears a different sound. Not the wind. Not a bird. A soft, deliberate rustle on the other side of the stone wall. He freezes. He holds his breath until his lungs burn. He waits, blending into the shadows of the tree trunk. From his pocket, he pulls out a small, brass toy. It is shaped like a little cricket. It was handed to him hours ago, a simple piece of metal that costs only a few pennies. But tonight, it is the most valuable thing he owns. It is the key to his survival, the password in the dark. His thumb rests on the metal strip. His hand is trembling, just slightly. It takes a profound, quiet courage to make a sound when all your instincts tell you to remain hidden in the dark. He takes a slow, steadying breath, closes his eyes, and presses down on the brass. Click-clack. The sharp, metallic snap cuts through the damp night air. It sounds incredibly loud. He waits. The silence that follows is agonizing. It stretches out, a heavy, suffocating blanket. He counts the seconds in his head. 1, 2, 3. He wonders if he imagined the rustling. He wonders if he is entirely alone in this vast, dark orchard. And then, from the shadows across the path, comes the reply. Click-clack. Click-clack. 2 snaps. The prearranged answer. The wave of relief that washes over him is purely physical. It is a sudden warmth in his chest, a loosening of the tight knot in his throat. He exhales a breath he feels he has been holding since he stepped out of the airplane door. He steps cautiously out from the shadow of the tree. From the other side of the lane, a dark silhouette detaches itself from the hedgerow. They move toward each other, low and quiet, walking through the silver moonlight. As they get closer, the moonlight catches the familiar angle of a jaw, the specific tilt of a helmet. Tommy, a voice whispers. It is barely a breath, fragile and soft. Yeah. It's me, Frank, the young man replies, his voice cracking just a little with the sheer, overwhelming joy of recognizing the boy from his own bunkhouse. They do not salute. They do not speak of orders or objectives. They simply reach out and grab each other. Frank's hand clamps down on Tommy's shoulder, holding on tight, gripping the rough wool as if to make sure the other boy is real and not a phantom born of the mist. Tommy reaches up and covers Frank's hand with his own. For a long moment, they just stand there in the damp grass, holding onto each other in the dark. In that simple touch, there is everything. There is the joy of survival, the comfort of brotherhood, the sudden, brilliant light of finding a friend in the deepest dark. The profound, aching loneliness of the drop is washed away by the presence of a familiar soul. Frank reaches down to his belt and unhooks his canteen. He unscrews the cap and offers it to Tommy. Tommy takes a long, slow drink of the cool, metallic-tasting water. He hands it back, wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve. "You got any gum?" Tommy whispers, a small, nervous smile playing on his lips. Frank reaches into his pocket, pulls out a crumpled half-stick of peppermint gum, and hands it over. It is slightly warm, dusted with lint from his pocket, but to Tommy, it is a feast. He folds it into his mouth, the sharp, sweet taste of peppermint a shocking burst of normalcy in an utterly surreal world. They sit down together at the base of an ancient oak tree, hidden within its massive roots. They do not talk much. They do not need to. Just being shoulder to shoulder is enough. The night is no longer a vast, terrifying void. It is just a dark space they are sharing together. All across the sleeping French countryside, this quiet, desperate search is happening. In flooded marshes, in dense woods, and the backyards of silent stone farmhouses. Hundreds of solitary boys, wandering through the mist, clicking tiny brass toys into the dark, praying for an answer. And when that answer comes, when the shadows separate and a brother steps forward, it is a quiet miracle. It is a testament to the enduring human need for connection. They find courage not in grand ideals, but in the familiar face of the boy from down the street, the boy who knows how to make them laugh, the boy who shares their fears. Look at them sitting there against the oak tree. Two young men leaning against each other as the first, faint shades of indigo begin to lighten the eastern edge of the sky. The stars above are beginning to fade, giving way to the approaching dawn. The silk parachutes lie hidden beneath the leaves, their brief, beautiful flight over. But the grace of this night remains. It is woven into the quiet way Frank passes the canteen back to Tommy. It is in the soft, steady rhythm of their breathing as they rest for just a moment before the sun rises. They are far from home, sitting in the damp earth of a foreign land, but in the comforting warmth of each other's presence, they have found a small, safe harbor in the starlight. Let the rustling leaves soothe you. Let the gentle sigh of the wind through the high branches carry away the weight of the night. The dark is retreating, slowly, softly. The sky is turning the color of faded denim. The crickets are quieting their songs, making way for the morning birds. They sit together in the peaceful twilight of the dawn, two boys who fell from the stars, quietly finding their footing on the earth, simply by finding each other. Watch the edge of the world turn from black to a soft, bruised gray as the long night finally surrenders to the dawn. The light does not arrive all at once on this morning. It creeps in slowly, almost hesitantly, painting the heavy, low-hanging clouds in shades of charcoal and pale silver. Out here, on the churning surface of the channel, the horizon is a blurred line between the dark water and the waking sky. The vast, invisible armada of the night is finally stepping into the light, revealing a sea covered in small, flat-bottomed boats, rising and falling with the deep, rhythmic breathing of the ocean. Listen to the water. It slaps hard against the blunt steel bows of the landing craft, sending plumes of freezing, white spray high into the morning air. The spray falls like heavy rain over the men huddled inside, misting their eyelashes, gathering in cold droplets on the rims of their heavy steel helmets. But there is a strange, hypnotic rhythm to it all. The engine rumbles, a deep, constant vibration that rattles the floorboards and hums deep within the bones. The boat dips into a trough, stomachs dropping with the sudden weightlessness, and then pushes slowly, laboriously, up the face of the next gray swell. Down and up. Down and up. A violent cradle rocking endlessly toward the coast. Inside these small steel walls, the air is dense. It smells of sharp diesel fumes, the metallic tang of salt water, and the damp, heavy scent of wet wool. The men are packed tightly together, standing shoulder to shoulder in the narrow space, swaying in unison with the movement of the sea. There is nowhere to sit, nowhere to step. They are a single, breathing forest of young men, bound together by the confines of the wood and metal that carry them. Look closely at their faces in this new, fragile light. The shadows of the night are washing away, revealing the pale, exhausted features of boys who have not slept. Their eyes are wide, fixed on the steel ramp at the front of the boat that blocks their view of the approaching shore. The ocean has not been kind to them. For hours, they have endured this sickening, relentless sway. In the center of the craft, a young man named Samuel leans heavily against the side of the boat, his eyes closed tightly against the dizzying motion. His face is the color of ash, his breathing shallow and rapid. The sea has taken all his strength, leaving him hollow and trembling. He feels completely untethered, lost in the chaotic motion of the waves. But he is not alone. Beside him stands his older brother, David. They grew up miles away from the ocean, on a quiet, dusty farm where the only waves were the wind blowing through acres of tall, golden wheat. David reaches out, his thick, calloused hand gripping the rough canvas strap on Samuel's shoulder. It is not a gentle touch, but a firm, solid anchor in a world that refuses to hold still. David leans in close, his lips nearly touching Samuel's ear to be heard over the roar of the diesel engine and the crashing water. He does not speak of the beach. He does not speak of what is waiting for them behind the steel ramp. Instead, he speaks of the creek behind their barn. Think of the water back home, Sammy, he whispers, his voice a steady, soothing hum. Think of how quiet it gets in the late afternoon. The way the willow branches dip down and brush the surface. Not moving at all. Just perfectly still, like glass. Samuel swallows hard, keeping his eyes squeezed shut, but he nods slightly. He focuses all his remaining energy on the weight of his brother's hand on his shoulder. It is the only thing in the universe that feels solid. He lets David's words paint a picture in the dark behind his eyelids. He imagines the warm summer sun baking the muddy banks of the creek. He imagines the smell of the dry grass, the lazy buzzing of a dragonfly. He breathes in, trying to catch the scent of that memory, using it to push away the overwhelming smell of the diesel and the sea. The boat pitches violently again, but Samuel's knees do not buckle. The hand on his shoulder holds him upright. It is a quiet, profound transfer of strength. An everyday heroism born of simple, enduring love. All around them, similar, silent graces are unfolding. Words are difficult to hear over the noise of the crossing, so the men speak in the ancient language of touch and shared glances. A soldier reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, clean handkerchief. He passes it without a word to the man in front of him, who is shivering violently from the cold spray. The man takes it, wipes the freezing salt water from his face, and turns back just enough to offer a small, tight smile of gratitude. It is a tiny, fleeting connection, but in the vast, cold expanse of the channel, it is a spark of immense warmth. Another boy, barely out of high school, is staring intently at his own hands. They are wrapped tightly around the wooden stock of his rifle, his knuckles stark white against the dark metal. He is trembling, a fast, uncontrollable vibration that has nothing to do with the cold. The man standing next to him, a quiet fellow who used to repair shoes in a busy city neighborhood, notices the shaking. He does not say a word. He simply reaches out and wraps his own large, steady hand over the boy's trembling fingers. He squeezes, just once, a firm reassurance. I am here. We are together. Slowly, the boy's breathing deepens. The shaking eases. The human touch, offered so simply, acts as a balm to the fraying edges of his nerve. As the morning light grows stronger, washing the sky in pale shades of lavender and blue, the details of the men become clearer. You can see the small, personal talismans they carry into the morning. A silver cross pressed against the collarbone. A lucky silver dollar rolled nervously between a thumb and forefinger. Tucked deeply inside the breast pocket of a young man near the front of the boat is a small bundle wrapped carefully in waterproof oilcloth. Inside that cloth is a letter. It arrived just days before they left the quiet English camps. It is from his wife, written in looping, elegant cursive. He does not need to open it. He has read it so many times that the words are etched into his very soul. He stands in the rocking boat, the cold spray washing over him, but in his mind, he is sitting at their small kitchen table. He can see the sunlight streaming through the window, catching the dust motes in the air. He can hear the soft, rhythmic sound of her sweeping the floor. In the letter, she wrote about the garden. She wrote that the roses they planted by the front steps had finally bloomed, a brilliant, defiant red. She wrote that she leaves the porch light on for him every single night. He presses his hand flat against his chest, right over the oilcloth bundle. He feels the steady, strong beat of his own heart against the palm of his hand. He is carrying her with him across the water. Her words are his armor. The thought of that porch light, burning brightly in the quiet American night, is a beacon guiding him through the gray fog of the channel. It is a silent promise that there is a world beyond this cold water, a world of warmth and love and blooming gardens waiting for his return. The sky is fully awake now. The bruised gray has softened into a pale, milky white. The mist hanging over the water begins to thin, torn away by the morning breeze. And then, faintly at first, the horizon begins to change. It is no longer just the endless line of the sea. A dark, jagged shape begins to materialize through the thinning fog. It is the coastline. It looks peaceful from this distance, a dark ribbon of earth separating the turbulent water from the sky. The rumble of the engine changes pitch, growing deeper, more strained. The boat is slowing down, preparing to meet the land. The tension inside the small steel box shifts. The swaying, the sickness, the cold, it all recedes, replaced by a profound, heavy anticipation. The moment of waiting is almost over. The long, dark night is behind them, and the reality of the morning is rushing up to meet them. Listen to the breathing of the men around you. It has changed. It is slower now, deeper. A collective drawing of breath. They are gathering themselves, pulling every quiet memory, every whispered prayer, every touch of a brother's hand deep inside their chests to fortify their spirits. David turns to Samuel. He does not let go of the canvas strap. He looks at his younger brother, his eyes soft and incredibly sad, yet filled with an unshakable resolve. "We walk together, Sammy," David whispers, his voice cutting through the noise just enough to be heard. "Straight off the ramp, and we don't stop walking until we reach the grass. You hear me? We walk together." Samuel opens his eyes. The sickness is still there, pooling in his stomach, but his gaze is clear. He looks at David, seeing the years of shared childhood, the scraped knees, the shared secrets in the dark of their bedroom, all leading to this single, monumental morning. He nods, slowly and deliberately. "Together," Samuel whispers back. The boat lurches suddenly as the water grows shallow. Beneath their feet, the steel hull scrapes against the hidden sandbars. A jarring, grinding sound that signals the end of the journey across the water. The gentle, rocking cradle of the deep sea is gone, replaced by the violent, shifting tides of the shoreline. They stand in the gray light, a band of brothers suspended in the final seconds before the world bursts open. They are ordinary men, farmers, mechanics, bakers, and students. They carry the fears of boys and the quiet, breathtaking courage of men who love the person standing next to them more than they love themselves. The heavy steel ramp at the front of the boat shudders. The chains rattle. Take one last, deep breath of the ocean air. Feel the cold mist on your face. Hold on to the memory of the quiet creek, the smell of the mother's kitchen, the light burning on the front porch. The long wait in the shadows is over. The dawn has arrived, and it is time to step forward into the light. Step forward into the cold, swirling water, and feel the sudden, heavy weight of the world drop away into the mist. The heavy iron ramp falls flat against the surf, a sudden bridge between the swaying boat and the churning sea. For hours, they have listened to the water beating against the steel hull in the dark, but nothing truly prepares a soul for the moment the ocean rushes in to meet their boots. The water is startlingly cold, a sharp, icy breath that steals the air from their lungs. As the men step off the edge, sinking into the gray-green swells, time itself seems to slow its frantic, racing pace. The world, which should be filled with a deafening roar, becomes strangely quiet in the mind. There is only the sound of their own ragged breathing, the splashing of the man immediately in front of them, and the gentle, relentless push of the tide against their hips. They wade into the vastness, weighed down by heavy canvas packs, saturated wool, and the immense, invisible burden of the morning. It is an overwhelming place to be, caught between the deep water behind them and the wide, open expanse of the shoreline ahead. Yet, they do not stop. They push through the resistance of the sea, leaning forward against the current, a slow and deliberate procession of ordinary men stepping out of the shadows and into the pages of time. The water is deeper than they were promised. For some, it reaches their chests, pulling at them with the ancient, rhythmic strength of the ocean. The footing is treacherous, hidden beneath the frothing surf. Here, in the cold water, the first acts of profound, quiet grace begin to unfold. A young boy, barely 19 years old, loses his balance as a wave breaks against his back. He slips beneath the surface, the weight of his sodden equipment pulling him down into the dark. But before the panic can truly take hold, a strong hand grips the webbing of his harness. It is a man from his squad, a quiet fellow who used to bake bread in a small corner shop before the world called him away. With a heavy, strained heave, the baker pulls the boy back up into the pale light. They stand waist deep in the churning water, chests heaving, water streaming from their helmets. No words of grand heroism are exchanged. There is no time for speeches. The older man simply keeps his hand firmly wrapped around the boy's strap, anchoring him against the tide. He nods, a small, reassuring movement of his chin, and together, they lean back into the water, continuing their slow walk toward the sand. It is in these small, unseen moments that the true fabric of courage is woven. It is not found in the absence of fear, but in the decision to reach out a hand in the dark. Finally, their heavy boots find the solid, unyielding earth of the continent. The water recedes, leaving them on the wet, shimmering edge of the beach. The sand is cold and packed hard by the retreating tide, a pale gray canvas beneath a sky the color of bruised slate. To lie upon this sand is to feel the overwhelming smallness of being human. The beach stretches out endlessly in both directions, a vast, flat expanse that offers no shelter, no comfort, only the terrifying reality of the open air. The wind howls across the flats, driving sharp grains of sand against their wet cheeks. They press themselves flat against the earth, clinging to the ground as if trying to merge with the very soil of France. The instinct is to simply stay there, to hide within the shallow grooves of the sand, to close their eyes and wait for the terrible storm to pass. The mind begs for stillness. The body aches for rest. The sheer, overwhelming confusion of the beach is a heavy fog that threatens to paralyze them. Everywhere they look, the carefully drawn plans of the generals have dissolved into the chaotic, unpredictable reality of the shoreline. Men are separated from their friends. Equipment is lost to the sea. They are alone, scattered across the vastness of the strand. And yet, against all the screaming instincts of preservation, they begin to move. What makes a person rise from the relative safety of the wet earth and crawl forward into the unknown? It is not the speeches of politicians echoing in his mind. It is not the grand, sweeping ideals of liberty or nations, painted in broad strokes on the canvas of history. Those concepts are too large, too abstract to hold any weight on this cold, windswept sand. The courage found here is intimately, beautifully small. It is localized to a radius of just a few feet. It is the profound, overriding instinct to protect the friend lying right beside them. Look at the two men taking shelter behind a heavy steel obstacle, rusted and half buried in the sand. One is a farm boy from the wide-open plains, the other a street-smart kid from the bustling avenues of a distant city. A year ago, they would have had nothing to say to each other. Today, they share a bond thicker than blood. The city boy is trembling, his face buried in the crook of his arm, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the noise and the wind. The farm boy reaches out and rests a heavy, mud-caked hand on his shoulder. He squeezes gently, an ancient, grounding comfort. He points toward a small rise in the shingle just ahead, a tiny crease in the earth that might offer slightly better protection. They lock eyes. An entire conversation passes between them in a single, quiet second. I am terrified. So am I. I cannot stay here. Neither can I. If we go together. They nod. And then, side by side, moving with a desperate, synchronized grace, they push up from the sand and scramble forward. They are pulled forward not by orders, but by the magnetic pull of their devotion to one another. This is the quiet rhythm of the morning. It is a symphony of small, desperately human acts. A man stops his own frantic crawl to pick up a pair of wire-rimmed glasses dropped by a stranger, pressing them softly into a trembling hand. A soldier who has lost his pack uses his bare hands to dig a shallow trench for a wounded brother, tearing at the wet earth with his fingernails, driven by a frantic, loving urgency. The air is filled with the soft, soothing murmurs of medics moving like angels through the gray light. They carry no weapons, only small canvas bags filled with bandages and the miraculous healing power of a gentle voice. They kneel in the wet sand, ignoring the chaos swirling around them, entirely focused on the fragile life resting in their arms. You're going to be all right, they whisper, wiping the damp hair from a pale, exhausted forehead. I'm right here. I'm not leaving you. The tone of their voices is the same soothing cadence a parent uses to calm a frightened child in the middle of the night. It is humanity at its absolute purest, shining brightly against the gray backdrop of the sky. The hours stretch, bending under the weight of the morning. The sand, originally a pale, washed-out gray, begins to take on a darker hue, stained by the immense, quiet cost of the crossing. Yet, amidst the sorrow, the sheer human will to endure is breathtaking to witness. They are exhausted, soaked to the bone, shivering in the coastal wind, yet they continue to inch their way forward. They move from a slight depression in the sand, to a piece of driftwood, to the meager shelter of the seawall. They do not march like conquerors, they crawl like pilgrims, bound by a sacred promise to simply survive together. Think of the letters resting in their damp pockets. The ink may be running, the paper soft and disintegrating, but the love contained within those folded squares remains untouched by the salt and the sea. The thoughts of front porches, of Sunday dinners, of a sweet voice singing in the kitchen, these are the invisible lifelines pulling them across the beach. They are fighting for the simple right to return to those quiet, ordinary moments. As the tide begins to shift, pulling back away from the shoreline, it leaves behind a changed world. The beach has become a testament to the extraordinary capacity of the ordinary heart. Look closely at the faces of the men who have finally reached the temporary safety of the grassy dunes. They are hollowed out, their eyes ancient and deeply weary. But as they lean against the cold earth, resting their heads back against the soil, you see them reach out. A hand blindly searches the stones until it finds the hand of the man sitting next to it. Fingers interlace. Thumbs stroke over dirty, bruised knuckles. They do not need to look at each other. They do not need to speak. The simple, undeniable warmth of another human being is enough. It is proof that they have made it through the longest morning. The sky above remains a cold, indifferent gray, and the sand beneath them holds the heavy memories of the dawn. But here, huddled together at the edge of the world, there is a profound and radiant warmth. It is the warmth of brotherhood, the quiet, unshakable resilience of the human spirit, resting gently on the shores of history. Lose yourself in the deep, green shadows of a world grown old and quiet. Move inland from the gray sand, away from the heavy, roaring tide, and step into the emerald heart of the Normandy countryside. Here, the sky is hidden. The open horizon of the ocean is replaced by a thick, living embrace. This is a landscape built by centuries of patient, forgotten hands. These are the hedgerows. To call them simply hedges is to misunderstand their ancient strength. They are massive, enduring walls of earth, packed dense and hard by time, crowned with twisting oaks, thick brambles, and tangled vines that weave together like the fingers of sleeping giants. They form a vast, beautiful labyrinth across the French fields. In the narrow, sunken dirt lanes between these towering walls of green, the air is perfectly still. The wind that battered the beaches cannot reach down into these hollows down here. It is cool and damp and wrapped in a profound, heavy silence. The light filters through the thick canopy of leaves and soft, dusty beams of gold and pale green, illuminating dancing specks of pollen and the gentle morning mist. It is a quiet, terrifying beauty. It is terrifying because it is a maze that swallows sound and sight, leaving a soul feeling entirely isolated from the rest of the world. Yet, it is beautiful because it feels like a sanctuary, a secret garden hidden away from the heavy burdens of the morning. In one of these sunken lanes, beneath the sprawling, moss-covered roots of an ancient ash tree, a small band of young men rests in the cool dirt. They are not a grand, organized force in this moment. They are just 5 boys, scattered by the chaos of the landing, who have somehow found each other in the winding green corridors. Their uniforms are damp, their heavy boots caked in the rich, dark soil of France. They sit with their backs pressed against the earthen wall, the knees drawn up to their chests. They are exhausted down to the very marrow of their bones. The adrenaline that carried them across the water and over the sand has finally faded, leaving behind a deep, aching weariness that makes their limbs feel like lead. For a long while, no one speaks. Words require an energy they simply do not have to give. But this shared silence is not empty. It is a thick, comforting blanket woven from sheer relief. To sit in the quiet, breathing the damp, earthy air, and to hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of another human being sitting just inches away, is a miracle all its own. Look at the boy leaning his head back against the soft moss. He closes his eyes, letting a single, warm beam of filtered sunlight rest across his tired face. Back home, in a bustling neighborhood full of brick walk-ups and noisy streets, he was never one for the quiet of the country. But right now, the smell of this alien forest is the sweetest thing he has ever known. He breathes in deeply. The air smells of crushed fern leaves, damp soil, sweet apple blossoms from a nearby orchard, and the faint, sharp tang of brass. He lets the scent ground him. He is alive. He is breathing. The earth beneath him is solid and still. Next to him sits a quiet lad from a valley town, a boy who grew up tracking deer through thick woods and knows the language of the forest. He watches a small, brown snail slowly make its way up the stem of a bright green fern. He watches it with a tender, childlike fascination. In the midst of the most monumental day of his life, his attention is entirely captivated by this tiny, fragile creature going about its slow, peaceful journey. It is a reminder that the world continues to turn. Nature remains entirely indifferent to the struggles of men. There is a profound comfort in that indifference. The trees do not judge, the earth simply holds them. The valley boy reaches down to his webbing and slowly unhooks his metal canteen. The canvas cover is wet and heavy. He unscrews the small black cap. The scrape of the metal threads is the loudest sound in the lane. He takes a small, careful sip. The water is lukewarm, tasting heavily of tin and iodine, but to a throat parched by fear and salt air, it is like nectar. He lowers the canteen, wipes his mouth with the back of a dirty sleeve, and without looking, holds it out to his right. The boy from the city takes it. Their fingers brush against each other, a brief, grounding contact. There is no thank you spoken aloud, only a soft, appreciative nod that goes unseen. The canteen moves slowly down the line of 5 men. Each takes a small, respectful sip, careful to leave enough for the brothers at the end of the row. It is a quiet communion, a holy ritual of the hedgerows. In sharing this simple, metallic-tasting water, they are silently affirming their devotion to one another. They are pouring their fading strength into a collective pool, making sure no one is left empty. When the canteen returns to its owner, a new ritual begins. The soldier at the far end of the line, a man slightly older than the rest with kind, crinkling eyes, reaches into the deep pocket of his jacket. His movements are slow and deliberate, treating the object he retrieves with utmost reverence. It is a crumpled, slightly damp paper pack of cigarettes. He opens it carefully. There are only 3 left. He pulls one out, smoothing the wrinkled white paper between his thumb and forefinger. He places it between his lips and retrieves a small metal matchbox. He strikes the match. The sudden hiss and flare of the yellow flame briefly illuminates the shadows of the sunken lane. He cups his hands around the flame to protect it from a breeze that isn't even there, a habit born of long nights in the wind. He inhales deeply, and the tip of the cigarette glows a bright, cherry red. He exhales, and a thin, blue ribbon of smoke curls upward, twisting and fading into the shafts of sunlight. He takes one more draw, and then, holding it between 2 fingers, he passes it to the man beside him. The cigarette travels exactly as the canteen did. Hand to hand. Lip to lip. It is a shared luxury, a tiny, burning ember of normalcy in a world turned completely upside down. As each man takes his turn, you can see the visible relaxation in his shoulders. The smoke carries with it the memory of corner stores, of break times behind factories, of warm summer evenings on front porches. For the 30 seconds it takes to smoke that shared cigarette, they are not soldiers lost in a foreign labyrinth. They are just friends, taking a rest in the shade of a magnificent garden. Tucked into the breast pocket of the youngest boy in the group is a small, pale blue envelope. It is bent at the corners and stained with a thumbprint of mud, but it is entirely intact. He doesn't pull it out, his hands are too dirty, and he refuses to risk tearing the fragile paper. Instead, he simply rests his hand over his pocket, pressing the envelope flat against his chest. It is a letter from his mother. He received it weeks ago, and he has read it so many times that the words are permanently etched into the walls of his mind. He sits in the quiet lane, his hand over his heart, and he listens to her voice in his head. She writes about the most gloriously mundane things. She writes that the neighbor's dog finally had her puppies. She writes that she left his winter coat out on the line to air out the mothballs. She writes that she made his favorite peach preserves and is saving a jar in the pantry for when he gets back. Peach preserves. The very thought of them brings a sudden, aching lump to his throat. He closes his eyes and tries to imagine the sweet, sticky taste of them, the smell of the sugar boiling on the stove. These ordinary details are not trivial, they are the entire universe. They are the reasons he kept walking through the dark, cold water. They are the invisible tethers that keep his spirit from floating away into the vastness of the war. He presses his hand a little tighter against the pocket. I am coming home to that pantry, he tells himself in the quiet dark of his own mind. I will sit at that kitchen table again. The shadows in the sunken lane begin to shift, growing longer as the morning stretches toward the afternoon. The air warms slightly, coaxing a rich, sweet perfume from the damp earth and the flowering vines overhead. A small yellow butterfly flutters down from the canopy, dancing erratically through the shafts of light before landing softly on the rim of a discarded helmet. The men watch it in silence. It is so impossibly delicate, so completely vulnerable, yet it moves with an absolute, fearless grace through this labyrinth of stone and root. It stays for only a moment, resting its fragile wings, before lifting off again and disappearing over the top of the ancient earthen wall. The older soldier, the one with the kind eyes, sighs softly. He crushes the tiny, extinguished stub of the cigarette into the dirt with the heel of his boot. He knows, and they all know, that they cannot stay in this green sanctuary forever. The world outside the hedgerows is still waiting. The maze must be navigated. But there is no rush in his movements. He places his hands flat on the damp earth and pushes himself up, his joints popping quietly in the stillness. He brushes the dirt from his trousers. He looks down at the four boys still sitting on the ground. He doesn't bark an order. He doesn't yell. He simply extends a hand downward. The city boy looks up, takes the offered hand, and lets himself be pulled to his feet. Then, the city boy turns and offers his hand to the valley boy. One by one, they pull each other up from the earth. They adjust their heavy straps, settle their helmets back onto their heads, and pick up the burdens they must carry. They stand together for one last second in the quiet shade of the great ash tree. They are no longer scattered. They are tethered to one another by the shared water, the shared smoke, and the profound, healing power of their shared silence. They look down the winding, sunken lane, into the twisting green shadows that lead deeper into the heart of Normandy. They take a breath of the sweet, apple-scented air. And then, moving softly, their boots crunching gently against the dirt, they walk forward into the labyrinth, carrying the light of their quiet brotherhood to guide them through the dark. Look for the purest light in the darkest places, and you will find it resting in the palms of ordinary hands. There is a sound on this windswept coast that rises above the rhythmic crashing of the waves and the heavy, distant thunder of the morning. It is a singular, human sound, called out across the damp sand and the broken earth. It is a single word, spoken sometimes as a desperate plea, and sometimes as a quiet, breathless whisper. Medic. When that word floats through the gray mist, figures begin to move. They do not carry heavy rifles. They do not look through the sights of weapons. Instead, they run through the shifting shadows carrying only thick canvas bags slung across their shoulders. Painted on their steel helmets is a simple symbol, a stark, bright cross. In this landscape of rusted iron and pale sand, that symbol is a beacon. It is a promise, painted in red and white, that even at the very edge of the world, compassion has not been abandoned. Watch one of these young men as he moves. His name is William. Just months ago, he was a quiet boy standing behind the wooden counter of a corner pharmacy in a sleepy town, his days measured out in glass bottles of cough syrup, paper envelopes of aspirin, and the smell of peppermint and floor wax. He was the boy who gently bandaged the scraped knees of neighborhood children when they fell from their bicycles. He has always possessed a profound, quiet gentleness. And now, he has brought that gentleness across the dark ocean, carrying it onto this cold, foreign beach. He drops to his knees in the wet sand beside a fallen soldier. The boy on the ground is trembling, his eyes wide and unfocused, lost in the overwhelming shock of the moment. The air around them is chaotic, swirling with salt spray and fear, but William creates a tiny, invisible sanctuary right there in the dirt. He leans in close, blocking the wind with his own body. "I'm here," William whispers, his voice smooth and steady, cutting through the confusion like a warm light. "Look right at me. You are going to be just fine. I've got you." The wounded boy's breathing is shallow, rapid like a frightened bird. William reaches out, and with bare, freezing hands, he gently cups the boy's pale face. He wipes the wet sand and the heavy sweat from the boy's forehead with his thumb. It is a touch of pure, unconditional grace. It is the touch of a mother checking a child for a fever in the middle of the night. It is the touch of a brother. In that simple, physical contact, the frantic trembling begins to slow. William opens his heavy canvas bag. Inside, there are neat rows of white gauze, brown glass bottles of iodine, and thick rolls of tape. It is a humble collection of cloth and medicine, but in William's hands, these simple items become instruments of salvation. His fingers move with a frantic, beautiful precision. He works quickly, but there is never a sense of panic in his touch. He wraps the stark white bandages around the injury, pressing firmly, binding the broken edges together. The white cotton is a striking contrast against the dark, wet wool of the uniform. It looks like a flag of truce, tied softly against the skin. "Tell me about home," William murmurs, never stopping his work, keeping his eyes entirely fixed on the boy. "Where did you come from before we ended up on this beach?" The boy swallows hard. "Michigan," he breathes out, his voice shaking. "A farm, near the lake." "A farm," William repeats softly, wrapping the final layer of gauze and tying it off with a gentle, secure knot. "I bet the summers are beautiful there. I bet the water is a whole lot warmer than this channel." "It is," the boy whispers. A tiny, fragile ghost of a smile touches the corners of his mouth. The pain is still there, but the blinding, suffocating fear has been pushed back. He is no longer alone on a vast, terrifying stretch of sand. He is with a friend. He is thinking of the sun on the lake. William reaches for his canteen, unscrewing the cap, and carefully lifts the boy's head, supporting the heavy steel helmet with his palm. He lets a few drops of cool water wet the boy's dry lips. "You rest now," William tells him, pulling a gray wool blanket from his pack and unfolding it over the boy's chest, tucking the edges in tightly against the wind. "The worst is over. You're going to see that lake again." These moments are unfolding everywhere, tucked away behind the seawalls, hidden in the shallow craters of the sand, and resting in the deep green shadows of the hedgerows. Small, quiet pockets of mercy blooming amidst the ruin. If you walk softly along the base of the stone seawall, you will find a makeshift sanctuary. It is a temporary hospital built of nothing but driftwood, damp blankets, and human devotion. Here, a row of wounded men lie resting in the shadow of the stones. The wind is blocked, and the air is heavy with the sharp, clean scent of iodine and the comforting smell of old wool. Moving among them are the medics, their uniforms stained and heavy with water, their faces drawn with an exhaustion so deep it settles into their bones. Yet, their hands never stop. They are artists of comfort. They adjust a folded coat beneath a head to make a softer pillow. They strike a match with weary, trembling fingers, cupping the flame to light a cigarette, and then holding it gently to the lips of a boy who cannot lift his own arms. One medic sits cross-legged in the sand next to a soldier who is drifting into a heavy, pained old sleep. The soldier's hand rests on his chest, fingers curled tightly around a small, folded piece of paper. It is a letter, written on pale blue stationery, smelling faintly of lavender powder. It has made the long journey across the Atlantic, carrying the hopes of a girl waiting on a porch step. The soldier opens his eyes, heavy with morphine and fatigue. He looks at the medic. "Don't let it blow away," he mumbles, his fingers loosening their grip as sleep overtakes him. "Please. Keep her safe." The medic smiles, a soft, weary expression of complete understanding. "I will," he whispers. He gently slips the letter from the boy's relaxing fingers. He smooths out a tiny crease in the corner, and then carefully tucks it into his own dry breast pocket, buttoning the flap securely. "She's safe with me. You just sleep." It takes a breathtaking amount of courage to walk into the storm unarmed, carrying nothing but bandages and a heart completely entirely open to the suffering of others. These medics are the keepers of the light. They absorb the pain of the morning, taking it into themselves so that their brothers do not have to carry it alone. Their hands are stained with the earth of Normandy and the heavy cost of the landing, yet they remain the softest, most beautiful things on this beach. Listen to the cadence of their voices. It is a continuous, soothing lullaby sung over the crashing surf. "Easy now. You're safe. I'm right beside you. Just squeeze my hand. Think of home." These words are as powerful as any medicine. They stitch together the fraying edges of the spirit. When a man is stripped of everything, when he is brought to the very limits of his endurance, the gentle touch of another human being reminds him that he is still loved, that he is still tethered to a world of kindness. As the hours drift by and the tide begins its slow, rhythmic retreat, the medics continue their quiet, desperate dance. Their backs ache, their boots are filled with cold water, and their eyes burn from the wind. But they do not stop. They cannot. They are driven by an ancient, profound instinct, the refusal to surrender to the dark. Look at William, leaning against the seawall for just a single, fleeting moment. He closes his eyes, letting his head tilt back against the cold stone. He takes a long, slow breath of the salt air. He is entirely depleted. But then, faintly, from down the line of huddled blankets, a quiet voice calls out in the gray light. William opens his eyes. He does not hesitate. He pushes himself away from the stone, picks up his heavy canvas bag, and begins to walk softly down the line. Let the image of these young men rest gently in your mind. In a world that seems to have forgotten its way, they are the quiet reminder of all that is good and enduring within us. They are ordinary boys performing miracles of tenderness in the dirt. Feel the warmth of their hands. Hear the soft, steady reassurance of their voices. Let the profound, quiet beauty of their mercy wash over you like the retreating tide, leaving behind a deep, abiding peace. They are the soothing angels of the shoreline, and in their gentle embrace, the broken pieces of the world are softly, lovingly held together. Watch the water, creeping forward inch by quiet inch, gently erasing the footprints left in the pale sand. The ocean is an ancient clock, and its pendulum is the tide. It does not care for the grand designs of men, for the carefully drawn charts, or the meticulously timed schedules worked out in warm, brightly lit rooms months ago. Out here, under the soft, bruised gray of the morning sky, the sea only knows its own rhythm. It breathes in, drawing the cold water up the shingle, and it breathes out, smoothing the beach into a clean, flat mirror. For the men standing on this unfamiliar stretch of coast, the rising water is a silent, gentle nudge. They have waded through the surf, pulling themselves from the heavy grasp of the channel, only to find that the world before them does not match the pictures they carried in their minds. The landmarks they memorized by the dim light of a lantern, a certain shape of a cliff, the spire of a village church, a specific notch in the dunes, are nowhere to be seen. The invisible currents of the night have carried them miles away from where they were supposed to be. The grand plan has dissolved into the mist. Stand beside a young man named Thomas as he realizes this quiet truth. Before he wore this heavy, damp wool uniform, he was a teacher in a small, brick schoolhouse. He is a man who loves the comforting certainty of a syllabus, the neat, orderly rows of desks, the predictable ringing of the afternoon bell. He reaches into his canvas pouch and pulls out a folded paper map. It is soaked through. The meticulously printed lines of roads and elevations have bled into soft, fuzzy watercolors of blue and green ink. The paper is so fragile it threatens to tear apart in the ocean breeze. Thomas looks at the map, and then he looks up at the sheer, unfamiliar bluff rising before him. There is no road here. There is no path. A profound, terrifying emptiness can settle into the heart when the plan falls away, leaving nothing but the vast unknown. But in this quiet space, where the machinery of strategy breaks down, something deeply beautiful takes its place. It is the simple, organic resilience of the human spirit. Thomas does not panic. He looks at the wet, useless paper in his hands, and a small, quiet sigh escapes his lips. He carefully folds the ruined map, the wet paper making a soft, slapping sound, and tucks it back into his pouch. He lets go of the plan. He accepts the reality of the sand beneath his boots and the cliff before his eyes. It is a moment of profound, invisible surrender, not to an enemy, but to the present moment. He turns to look at the men huddled around him. They are a fractured mosaic of different boats, different backgrounds, different lives. Most of them are complete strangers. They are looking at Thomas not because he wears a badge of high authority, but simply because he is standing tall, his face calm in the gray light. In the absence of orders, humanity naturally seeks out the quietest, steadiest heart. True leadership in these hidden corners of the morning is not found in shouting or waving arms. It is found in a steady gaze, a soft voice, and the willingness to take the first step into the unknown. "Well," Thomas whispers, the wind carrying his voice to the men closest to him. "It seems we are going to have to find our own way up." There is no argument. There is only the collective, silent agreement of men who know they cannot stay where they are. The tide is ticking behind them, a slow, methodical sweep of water turning the dry sand wet. They must move. Beside Thomas stands a boy who grew up on the rocky shores of Maine, a boy whose childhood was measured by the ebb and flow of the Atlantic. He watches the water inch closer to their heavy boots. He knows the ocean is not malicious, it is simply inevitable. He reaches out and lightly touches the sleeve of a man shivering next to him. "The water's coming up," the boy from Maine says, his voice a soothing, familiar hum. "Let's move toward the grass. Just keep your eyes on the grass." They begin to walk, moving parallel to the shoreline, searching for a seam in the earth, a hidden path worn by centuries of rain. They are a makeshift family, born of the shifting sands and the rising tide. The borders that separated them yesterday, where they came from, what they did for a living, have been entirely washed away by the channel. They are bound together now by the simple, immediate necessity of putting one foot in front of the other. As they move, the beautiful, quiet mechanics of adaptation begin to turn. They lean on each other, a web of sudden, absolute trust. A man trips over a piece of submerged driftwood, his heavy canvas pack pulling him off balance. Before his knees can hit the wet stones, two pairs of hands reach out from the mist, grabbing his webbed harness, pulling him upright. They do not know his name. He does not know theirs. They do not stop walking. The hands simply hold him steady until he finds his footing, give his shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze, and then let go. It is a seamless, wordless choreography of care. Further down the line, a young soldier stops, his face tight with frustration. The thick leather strap of his heavy boot has snapped under the strain of the wet sand, leaving the boot loose and nearly impossible to walk in. He kneels in the shingle, his cold fingers fumbling helplessly with the broken leather. A mechanic named Elias stops beside him. Back home, Elias spent his days in a dusty garage smelling of motor oil and old rubber, fixing broken things. He knows that when the proper part is missing, you use whatever you have in your pockets. Elias kneels in the wet sand next to the boy. He doesn't ask what's wrong, he just sees the need. He reaches deep into the pocket of his damp trousers and pulls out a length of thick, rough twine he had saved for tying a bedroll. "Here," Elias whispers, his hands moving with quiet, practiced efficiency. He threads the twine through the brass eyelets of the boy's boot, pulling it tight across the wet leather, tying a thick, secure knot. He pats the boy's ankle firmly. "That'll hold you until we reach the top. It's not pretty, but it'll hold." The boy looks up, his eyes shining with a gratitude too deep for words. He simply nods. Elias offers a hand, pulls the boy to his feet, and they continue walking. It is a tiny, magnificent act of everyday heroism. A piece of string, a moment of pause, a gentle touch that says, "I will not leave you behind to face the tide alone." They press forward, the sea gently lapping at the heels of the men in the rear. The rhythm of their walking becomes a meditation. Crunch, step, breathe. Crunch, step, breathe. They are learning to move not as cogs in a massive, distant machine, but as a single, breathing organism. If the line slows in the front, the men in the back stop patiently, trusting that a path is being found. Elias walks with his head down, listening to the wind. In his breast pocket, safe in a waterproof sleeve, is a letter from his father. It was written on the night he left for the training camps. He knows the final lines by heart. "The world will rarely give you a perfect road, son. When the road runs out, just do the best you can with what you have in front of you." He feels the truth of those words in his weary bones. The grand, perfect road they were promised is gone, swallowed by the morning fog and the navigation errors. But what they have in front of them is enough. They have the solid earth, they have the air in their lungs, and they have the quiet strength of the men walking beside them. They are adapting to the world as it is, rather than grieving the world as it was supposed to be. Finally, Thomas, walking at the head of this quiet procession, stops. He points toward the bluff. There, hidden from the sea by a fold in the earth, is a narrow draw. It is not marked on any map. It is a shallow, sandy chute cutting up through the steep rock, carved by centuries of rainwater running down to the sea. It is steep, and it is choked with thick, tangled brush, but it is a way up. Here, Thomas says, his voice carrying a soft, luminous relief. We go up here. They turn away from the water and face the earth. The climb is exhausting. The wet sand slips beneath their boots, and the thorny brush tears at their heavy wool uniforms. But the mechanics of their new, makeshift family take over. The men who are stronger climb a few feet, then turn around, bracing their boots against a solid root or a heavy stone. They reach their hands down into the gray light. The men below reach up, grabbing wrists, forearms, canvas straps. They pull each other up the chute, a continuous, living chain of human effort. When a man's strength falters, when he feels he cannot lift his legs one more time, he feels a heavy hand press against the middle of his back, physically pushing him upward. "I've got you," a voice whispers from below. "Just one more step. I'm right behind you." The ticking of the tide grows fainter as they climb higher, the sound of the ocean muffled by the dense brush and the earth. They are leaving the shifting sands behind. They are leaving the broken plans and the useless maps down on the beach, to be washed away by the sea. They emerge slowly over the crest of the draw, spilling out onto the flat, coarse grass of the Normandy fields. The wind is different up here. It smells of damp soil and ancient roots, a deeply comforting, grounded scent. Thomas pulls himself over the edge and lies flat on his back in the wet grass, staring up at the bruised gray sky. Beside him, Elias rolls onto his side, his chest heaving, a small, weary smile touching his lips. One by one, the strangers pull each other over the edge, collapsing into the grass, a tangle of exhausted, quietly triumphant boys. Listen to the sound of their breathing. It is heavy, but it is steady. The panic of the unknown has passed. They lie in the grass, their shoulders touching, connected by the invisible threads of the morning. They did not have the right map. They did not have the right plan. But they had the profound, quiet grace to adapt, to reach out, and to carry each other away from the water's edge. Down below, the sea continues its ancient rhythm, the tide gently washing over the stones, smoothing the sand, keeping time for a world that has already moved on. But up here, in the quiet grass, there is only the peaceful, enduring warmth of men who found their way home in the dark, simply by trusting the hand of the stranger beside them. Listen to the heavy, wooden door creaking open, letting the first soft sliver of daylight fall into the dusty dark. Move away from the open fields and the ancient, tangled hedgerows, and step softly into the narrow, cobblestone streets of a sleeping Normandy village. Here, the world feels incredibly old, built of thick gray stone, slate roofs, and heavy oak shutters that have been pulled tightly closed against the morning. The chaotic noise of the coast is only a distant, muffled rumble here, replaced by a heavy, expectant quiet. The dust from the dirt roads is slowly settling back down to the earth, coating the blooming rose bushes and the wooden carts in a fine, pale powder. The village holds its breath, a place caught perfectly in the space between the dark of yesterday and the light of tomorrow. Deep beneath these quiet streets, hidden from the sky, the true heartbeat of the village is waiting. Beneath the stone floors of the farmhouses and the bakeries, down narrow, winding stone steps, the cellars are full. For countless hours, these cold, damp rooms have been a sanctuary. The air down here is thick and heavy, smelling of damp earth, stored root vegetables, old cider casks, and the nervous sweat of huddled families. In the dim, flickering light of a single, nearly exhausted candle, faces are drawn and pale. They sit close together on wooden crates or directly on the hard dirt floor, wrapped in heavy woolen blankets. A grandmother quietly moves a string of wooden beads through her trembling fingers, her lips barely moving as she repeats a comforting, ancient prayer. Beside her, a young mother holds her small daughter tightly against her chest, wrapping her arms around the child's ears to muffle the unfamiliar sounds of the world shifting above them. They have lived in the shadow of a long, heavy occupation, and the morning has brought only uncertainty. They do not know whose boots are walking across the cobblestones above their heads. They only know to wait, to stay perfectly still, and to listen to the vibrations traveling down through the ancient stone walls. Above them, walking with a slow, agonizing exhaustion, is a young soldier named Henry. He is covered in the pale gray sand of the beach and the dark, rich soil of the hedgerows. His uniform is heavy with dampness, his shoulders aching beneath the weight of his canvas pack. He is a boy from a quiet, wide-open prairie town, a place where the houses are made of painted wood and the horizons stretch out forever. These narrow, walled-in streets feel strange and labyrinthine to him. He moves cautiously, his boots making soft, scuffing sounds against the stones. He is so incredibly tired. The adrenaline that carried him across the water has completely burned away, leaving only a hollow, echoing weariness. He leans a hand against the side of a stone farmhouse just to steady himself, feeling the rough, sun-warmed texture of the ancient rock against his dirty palm. As he pauses, he notices a heavy wooden door set low into the foundation of the house, nearly flush with the cobblestones. It is a cellar door. Henry stands still, his heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He looks at the heavy iron latch. He knows he must check the cellars, to ensure the village is truly quiet, to secure the path for the brothers walking behind him. He takes a deep, steadying breath, filling his lungs with the scent of crushed lavender and stone dust. He lowers his weapon, keeping it pointed toward the earth, his finger resting gently along the wooden stock. He does not want to bring the harshness of the morning into this quiet place. He reaches down, his fingers brushing against the cold, rusted iron of the latch. He lifts it slowly. It makes a loud, metallic clack that echoes loudly in the quiet street. Down in the dark, the family freezes. The mother pulls her child closer, burying her face in the girl's soft hair. The grandmother stops the movement of her beads. Every eye is fixed on the narrow sliver of the wooden ceiling. The moment stretches, fragile as a pane of glass. Slowly, Henry lifts the heavy wooden door. A brilliant, blinding shaft of late afternoon sunlight pours down the stone steps, cutting through the damp gloom of the cellar. Millions of tiny dust motes dance and swirl in the golden beam. The light hits the dirt floor, illuminating the edges of a woven blanket, the toe of a worn leather shoe, the terrified, wide eyes of a child. Henry peers down into the shadows. His silhouette blocks a portion of the sun, casting a long, dark shadow across the cellar floor. For a terrifying second, the family below sees only the outline of a soldier, the shape of a helmet, the bulk of a uniform. The breath catches in their throats. But then, Henry shifts. The sunlight catches his face. It is not the hard, unyielding face of a conqueror. It is the face of an exhausted, dirt-streaked boy. His helmet is pushed slightly back on his head, revealing a tangle of damp, messy hair. His eyes are soft, filled with a deep, recognizable weariness. He looks down at the huddled family, at the grandmother, at the mother shielding her child, and he feels a sudden, profound ache in his chest. They look just like the neighbors on his street back home. They look like humanity, fragile and afraid in the dark. The heavy, metallic tension of the war completely evaporates from Henry's shoulders. He lets his weapon hang loosely by its canvas strap. He takes off his heavy steel helmet, holding it by his side, a universal gesture of peace. He wants them to see his face clearly. He wants them to know that the long, dark wait is over. He smiles. It is a small, crooked, weary smile, but it reaches all the way to his eyes. "Hello," Henry whispers down into the quiet. His voice is incredibly soft, hoarse from the wind and the salt water. In the cellar, the mother stares up at him. She looks at the shape of his helmet, now resting by his side. She looks at the patch on his shoulder. She looks at the unmistakable, gentle youth in his eyes. And then, a sound escapes her. It is not a word. It is a long, shuddering exhale, a breath she feels she has been holding for years. The tight, defensive posture of her shoulders crumbles. The tears, held back by sheer force of will for countless hours, finally spill over her eyelashes, tracing clean, shining lines down her dusty cheeks. "American," she breathes out, the word floating up the stairs like a prayer. "American." She stands up, her legs trembling slightly, and begins to climb the stone steps toward the light. She moves slowly, as if she is waking from a very long, very deep sleep. Behind her, the grandmother crosses herself, her hands shaking, her eyes closed in silent, overwhelming gratitude. Henry steps back from the door, giving them room to emerge. They step out onto the cobblestones, blinking against the sudden brightness of the afternoon sun. The air is warm and smells of freedom. The mother looks at Henry, really looks at him. She sees the mud on his uniform, the dark circles under his eyes, the sheer exhaustion written in the slump of his shoulders. She reaches out a hesitant hand and lightly touches the rough wool of his sleeve. It is a touch of pure reverence. Henry looks down at her hand. He feels a sudden, overwhelming urge to cry himself, but he simply covers her small hand with his own large, dirty one. He nods gently. No common language is needed. The shared glance between them holds an entire dictionary of emotion. It speaks of the sorrow of the past, the terror of the morning, and the profound, quiet relief of this specific moment. From behind the mother's skirt, the little girl peeks out. She is perhaps 5 years old, with dark curls dusted with cellar dirt. She looks at Henry, at his strange uniform and his towering height. But she sees his soft smile, and the fear leaves her. She turns back toward the cellar steps, reaches down into a woven basket resting on the top stair, and pulls out an apple. It is small, a little wrinkled from being stored through the long winter, but its skin is a deep, beautiful red. It is a treasure, carefully hoarded in the dark, saved for a moment of desperate need. The little girl steps forward, holding the apple out in her small, pale hands, offering it to the giant, exhausted boy from across the ocean. Henry drops to one knee, so that he is eye level with her. The cobblestones are hard against his joint, but he does not care. He looks at the apple, and then at the girl's bright, hopeful eyes. He reaches out with trembling fingers and takes the fruit. The skin of the apple is cool to the touch. It feels like the most valuable, beautiful thing in the entire world. It is a gift of absolute grace, an offering of life from the very earth they have just crossed the sea to reach. "Thank you," Henry whispers, his voice thick with emotion. He brings the apple to his nose and breathes in the sweet, tart scent. It smells like the orchards of his childhood. It smells like peace. He carefully places the apple in the deep pocket of his jacket, next to a folded letter from his own mother, resting against his heart. Then, he searches his webbed pouches. His fingers find a small, foil-wrapped rectangular package. He pulls it out. It is a piece of chocolate, melted and rehardened a dozen times in the warmth of his pocket, dusted with lint and sand. He peels back a corner of the silver foil and holds it out to the little girl. She looks at her mother, who nods softly, tears still shining on her face. The girl reaches out and takes the chocolate. She brings it to her mouth, and as the sweet cocoa touches her tongue, her eyes widen in sheer delight. It is a taste of a world she barely remembers, a taste of a childhood returned to her in the dusty street. Slowly, the rest of the village begins to awaken. More heavy wooden doors creak open. More faces emerge from the shadows, blinking in the sunlight. The quiet street begins to fill with soft voices, with the rustle of clothing, with the gentle shuffling of hesitant footsteps. Other soldiers, as weary and dirt-streaked as Henry, come walking softly down the lane. They do not march. They walk like tired men coming home from a long, hard shift in the fields. And as they pass the open doors, the beautiful, quiet encounters multiply. An old man, leaning heavily on a wooden cane, shuffles out of his doorway. He carries a small, dusty bottle of wine and 2 small glass tumblers. He stops a passing soldier, pouring a small measure of the dark red liquid with shaking hands. They clink the glasses together without a word. The soldier drinks, closes his eyes, and exhales a long breath, letting the warmth of the wine soothe his frayed nerves. A woman carries a wooden bucket of clean well water and a white cloth, offering it to the men resting on the low stone walls. She gently washes the dirt and the gray sand from their faces, her hands moving with the tender, practiced care of a mother. The men sit still, leaning into her touch, letting the cool water wash away the heavy residue of the morning. There are no brass bands here. There are no grand speeches from podiums, no cheering crowds throwing confetti. The liberation of this quiet village is a deeply intimate, hushed affair. It is built on small, sacred exchanges. A gifted apple. A shared piece of chocolate. A clean cup of water. It is the profound, beautiful recognition of shared humanity. The soldiers look at the villagers and see the families they left behind in their own quiet towns. The villagers look at the soldiers and see the sons they have prayed for in the dark. In the space between them, the heavy, suffocating weight of the war is temporarily lifted, replaced by the simple, radiant warmth of compassion. Henry sits on a low stone wall next to the cellar door, his back resting against the warm stone of the house. The little girl sits a few feet away, happily chewing her chocolate, her legs swinging back and forth. The mother sits beside Henry, offering him a small, chipped ceramic cup of weak tea. He takes a sip. It is warm and comforting. He watches the dust motes drifting lazily in the sunlight. He listens to the soft murmur of French and English blending together in the narrow street, a gentle, soothing melody. The longest morning is over. The shadows of the cellars have been pushed back by the light of the afternoon. Reach into your pocket and feel the smooth, cool skin of the apple. Feel the warmth of the sun on your tired face. Let the tension drain from your shoulders, flowing down into the ancient, solid cobblestones. The world is still bruised, and the journey is far from over, but here, in this quiet village, there is a beautiful, enduring peace. It is the peace of open doors, of shared glances, and of voices finally free to speak aloud in the comforting light of day. Feel the rough, cold bite of heavy, wet rope slipping slowly through the palms of your hands. Look up from the narrow strip of gray shingle and see the earth rising sharply into the bruised morning sky. These are the cliffs. They stand like ancient, silent sentinels, sheer walls of chalk and deeply scarred limestone, towering high above the churning, restless channel. For centuries, these cliffs have only known the gentle touch of the sea mist and the loud, echoing cries of the ocean birds. But on this quiet, heavy morning, they have become a breathtaking stairway between the water and the sky. The beach here is practically non-existent, swallowed by the rising tide, leaving no room for a man to stand and simply catch his breath. The only way forward is up. Hanging down the face of this imposing wall are thick, heavy ropes. They are anchored somewhere above, invisible in the gray fog, their iron hooks buried deep into the soft soil of the summit. The ropes swing gently in the coastal wind, slapping softly against the damp rock. They are soaked through with salt water, dark and heavy, dripping slowly onto the stones below. Stand at the base of this towering monument of stone. Place your hands on the thick, braided hemp. It is freezing, the water instantly numbing the tips of your fingers. The air smells intensely of wet chalk, crushed sea grass, and the sharp, metallic tang of the ocean. The wind pulls at the heavy wool of your jacket, a constant, whispering reminder of the vast, open space waiting just behind you. Begin to climb. The first pull is an agonizing shock to the system. The muscles in the arms, already trembling from the long, dark journey across the channel, burn with sudden, blinding heat. The heavy, waterlogged boots scramble desperately against the sheer rock face, searching for a tiny ledge, a crack, any small imperfection in the stone to hold their weight. But this is not a frantic, rushed descent. The cliff demands respect. It demands a slow, methodical rhythm. Reach. Grip. Pull. Step. It is a deeply physical meditation. Every single inch of upward movement must be earned through sheer, unyielding endurance. The world narrows down to the rough texture of the rope, the cold stone against the cheek, and the sound of ragged, heavy breathing. Hanging halfway up this colossal wall is a young man named Elias. Back home, Elias was a carpenter. His hands are strong, calloused from years of working with smooth pine and sweet-smelling cedar. He knows the weight of wood and the geometry of solid things. But this jagged, unpredictable rock is a different world entirely. His knuckles are scraped and bleeding, his fingernails caked with white chalk and dark earth. He pauses, hanging suspended between the ocean and the sky. He wraps the heavy rope once around his forearm, leaning his forehead against the cool, damp face of the cliff. He closes his eyes and just breathes. He listens to the wind. He listens to his own heart, beating a rapid, heavy drum against his ribs. He feels so incredibly small here, a tiny, fragile speck clinging to the side of a sleeping giant. The weight of the equipment on his back feels like an anchor, trying to pull him back down into the gray water below. The exhaustion is not just physical, it is a heavy, dark blanket settling over his mind, whispering softly that it would be so much easier to simply let go, to slide back down, to close his eyes and rest. But Elias does not let go. He does not climb for glory. He does not climb to conquer the mountain. He climbs because of the boy on the rope right beneath him. Look down the length of the thick hemp, disappearing into the mist below. Just a few yards down, struggling against a sheer, completely smooth patch of limestone, is a boy named Thomas. Thomas is young, barely old enough to shave, with a face that belongs in a high school classroom, not on this unforgiving wall. His boots keep slipping against the wet rock, sending tiny showers of pebbles falling silently into the void. His arms are shaking violently, his grip on the rope faltering. Elias feels the vibration of Thomas's struggle traveling up the rope. It is a silent language, a telegraph of pure, human desperation. Elias opens his eyes. He shifts his weight, finding a tiny, solid outcropping of rock for the toe of his right boot. He braces himself, pushing his body tight against the cliff face, anchoring himself as firmly as he possibly can. He wraps his left hand around the rope, locking it into place. He looks down. "Tommy," Elias whispers. The wind snatches the word away, so he says it again, a little louder, but still keeping his voice remarkably calm and steady. "Tommy. Look up here." Thomas lifts his head. His face is pale, smeared with white chalk dust and sweat. His eyes are wide, filled with a terrifying, paralyzing vertigo. "I'm slipping, El," Thomas breathes out, his voice cracking. "I can't hold it. My hands are entirely numb." Elias does not offer empty platitudes. He does not yell at the boy to be brave. Instead, he makes a quiet, absolute promise in the mist. "I have the rope, Tommy," Elias says softly, his voice a warm, grounding tether in the cold air. "I am holding it tight right above you. You are not going to fall. Do you hear me? I will not let you fall." It is a profound, breathtaking moment of everyday heroism. Elias is already at the absolute limit of his own endurance. Every muscle in his body is screaming for relief. Yet, he willingly takes on the weight of another soul. He becomes the anchor. He becomes the solid ground that Thomas cannot find beneath his feet. Thomas stares up at the older boy. He sees the absolute certainty in Elias's eyes, the unyielding grip of his scarred, carpenter's hands on the thick rope. And slowly, beautifully, the panic in Thomas's chest begins to recede. He takes a long, shuddering breath. He trusts Elias more than he trusts the rope, more than he trusts the rock, more than he trusts his own failing strength. "Okay," Thomas whispers. "Find the groove just to your left," Elias guides him, his voice patient and entirely focused. "Just slide your boot over 2 inches. There's a lip there. I've got you. Just take the step." With agonizing slowness, Thomas moves his foot. The heavy leather boot scrapes against the limestone, searching, slipping slightly, and then it catches. A tiny, hidden ridge of rock holds his weight. He pushes up, his hands finding new purchase on the rope. "That's it," Elias murmurs, a soft, encouraging melody over the sound of the wind. "Just like that. One step at a time. We go together." They resume their climb, a slow, synchronized dance on the vertical plane. When Elias pulls himself up, Thomas rests. When Thomas struggles, Elias stops and holds the line steady. They are bound together by the rough hemp, but more importantly, they are bound by a deep, unspoken vow of brotherhood. The sheer rock face, which seemed so impossibly vast and cruel moments ago, has been reduced to the space between two friends. To distract himself from the burning in his shoulders, Elias lets his mind drift away from the cliff. Tucked safely inside the inner pocket of his heavy wool jacket, resting right against his chest, is a small, silver pocket watch. It belonged to his grandfather. It is heavy and cool to the touch. As he pulls himself up another foot, he imagines he can hear it ticking over the sound of the wind. A slow, steady, reassuring heartbeat of metal and glass. He thinks of the small, quiet room back home where it used to sit on a wooden dresser. He thinks of the soft, yellow light of the bedside lamp, the smell of clean cotton sheets, the quiet, safe darkness of a room that does not move. He uses that memory as a shield against the cold. He wraps the thought of that quiet room around himself like a warm blanket. He is not just climbing to reach the top of a cliff in France, he is climbing to get back to that room. Every agonizing pull on the wet rope brings him 1 inch closer to home. The mist begins to thin as they climb higher. The bruising gray of the sky slowly softens into a pale, milky white. The sound of the ocean below fades into a distant, muffled sigh. And then, Elias feels a change in the air. The wind shifts, blowing across his face, carrying with it a scent that makes his heart skip a beat. It is not the smell of salt and chalk. It is the smell of damp earth. It is the scent of crushed clover and wet grass. He looks up. Just a few feet above him, the sheer vertical stone rounds off into a gentle lip. He has reached the summit. With one final, massive surge of his remaining strength, Elias reaches up. His hand clears the edge of the stone. His fingers do not find hard, unyielding rock. They sink deeply into soft, wet soil and thick, green grass. The sheer, overwhelming relief of that sensation is indescribable. It is the touch of life. He pulls himself over the edge, rolling onto his back in the tall, damp grass. He lies there for a moment, completely still, staring up at the white sky. The solid earth beneath him feels like a miracle. It holds him securely, demanding nothing, simply offering rest. But he cannot rest yet. Elias rolls back onto his stomach, moving quickly to the edge of the cliff. He reaches down into the gray void, his hands grasping the heavy rope. "Tommy," he calls out, his voice full of the warm, rich promise of the earth. "I'm here. I'm at the top. Give me your hand." A moment later, Thomas's pale, exhausted face appears over the edge. His eyes are wide, searching frantically. Elias reaches down, grabs the heavy canvas webbing of Thomas's harness, and pulls with everything he has left. Thomas collapses over the lip of the cliff, tumbling onto the soft grass beside Elias. He curls into a ball, his hands clutching the damp earth as if he is afraid it might suddenly vanish beneath him. He is gasping for air, tears of pure, physical exhaustion streaming down his dirt-streaked face. Elias crawls over to him. He doesn't say a word. He simply reaches out and rests his heavy, scarred hand flat against the center of Thomas's heaving back. He leaves it there, a firm, warm, grounding weight. "You are safe," the hand says in the quiet language of the summit. "We made it. The ground is holding us now." Slowly, the frantic heaving of Thomas's chest begins to ease. He turns his head, resting his cheek against the cool, wet clover. He looks at Elias, and a small, fragile, immensely beautiful smile touches his lips. All along the edge of the cliff, this quiet scene is repeating itself. Shadows pulling each other up from the dark mist. Men collapsing into the sweet-smelling grass, utterly spent, anchored to the earth by the hands of their brothers. They lie together in the green fields of Normandy, a band of ordinary boys who carried each other up a mountain of stone. Let the sound of their slow, steady breathing wash over you. Feel the softness of the grass beneath your own back. The exhausting climb is finished. The vertical world has been left behind, replaced by the gentle, rolling meadows of the continent. The ropes hang empty in the mist, their work completed. The promise was kept. Rest here in the quiet grass, surrounded by the profound, enduring warmth of men who refused to let each other fall, and let the peace of the solid earth gently rock you into stillness. Watch the delicate, uncontrollable flutter of a young man's fingers as the heavy weight of survival finally settles into his bones. The deafening roar of the morning has slowly washed away, leaving behind a strange, hollow quiet along the edge of the world. The great, sweeping tide of the ocean has retreated, and the frantic, desperate push forward has paused, just for a moment. What remains is a landscape forever altered, a surreal shoreline scattered with the heavy, rusted wreckage of the crossing. Twisted iron, shattered wood, and discarded canvas lie half buried in the damp, gray sand. But if you look closely, nestled among the ruins, you will find small, hidden pockets of profound, beautiful humanity. When the adrenaline finally begins to drain from the body, when the mind realizes that the immediate danger has passed and the breath can be drawn deeply once again, a profound physical reaction takes over. It is not fear. It is the raw, vibrating aftermath of endurance. It is the trembling. It starts deep within the chest, a quiet fluttering that travels down the arms and settles into the hands. These are hands that have gripped thick, wet ropes, hands that have carried the immense weight of the morning, hands that have held desperately onto the brothers beside them. Now, in the stillness, they shake like leaves caught in an autumn wind. Behind the meager shelter of a crumbling stone seawall, a young soldier named Arthur sits with his knees pulled tightly to his chest. He is a boy from a quiet, rainy town built of red brick and shining cobblestones, a place where the air smells of coal smoke and damp wool. Right now, he is entirely covered in the pale dust of the French coast and the dark mud of the sea. His shoulders are slumped, heavy with an exhaustion so deep it feels woven into his very soul. He holds his hands out in front of him, staring at them as if they belong to a stranger. The trembling is violent, a rapid and voluntary shudder that he cannot command to stop. He closes his eyes and takes a slow, shaky breath. He knows what he needs. He does not need a grand speech. He does not need a map or a compass. He needs the deeply grounding, incredibly surreal comfort of an ordinary ritual. Arthur reaches into the deep, heavy pocket of his jacket. His shaking fingers fumble clumsily with the brass button, finally working it free. He pulls out a small, rectangular metal box. It is dented at the corners and scratched from the journey, but to Arthur, it is the most precious thing he carries. It is a tiny, folding stove. He places it carefully on a flat rock, shielding it from the persistent ocean breeze with his own body. His movements are agonizingly slow, hindered by the tremors in his hands, but he is completely, singularly focused. This small task is a tether holding him to the earth. He retrieves a small, white square of solid fuel and sets it inside the metal frame. Next comes the matchbook. Striking a match in the wind with hands that refuse to hold still is a quiet, desperate battle. The first match snaps in half. The second sparks faintly and is immediately stolen by the breeze. Arthur closes his eyes again, frustrated, the trembling spreading to his jaw. From the shadows of the seawall, another soldier moves closer. His name is Edward. He does not ask what Arthur is doing. The ritual is universally understood. Edward kneels in the damp sand. He does not speak a word. He simply reaches out and cups his large, dirty hands around Arthur's small stove, forming an impenetrable wall against the wind. Arthur looks up, his eyes meeting Edward's in the gray light. A silent, profound gratitude passes between them. Arthur strikes the third match. It flares into a bright, beautiful yellow flame. He touches it to the fuel tablet, and a small, steady fire begins to burn. It is a tiny, fragile beacon of warmth in a vast, cold world. Arthur unscrews the cap of his canteen and pours a measure of water into his battered tin mug. He sets the mug over the small flame. Now, the hardest part begins. The waiting. They sit shoulder to shoulder in the damp sand, their eyes completely mesmerized by the small tongue of fire licking the bottom of the tin. The silence between them is comfortable and heavy. The wind howls over the top of the seawall, carrying the smell of salt and shattered stone, but right here, in this tiny circle of heat, there is only the comforting smell of the burning fuel and the faint, sweet promise of what is to come. Slowly, incredibly slowly, tiny bubbles begin to form at the bottom of the tin mug. They rise to the surface, breaking with a soft, delicate hiss. A thin ribbon of white steam begins to curl upward, twisting and dancing in the cold air. Arthur reaches into a waterproof pouch and pulls out a small, crumpled envelope of tea powder, mixed heavily with sugar and powdered milk. It is a humble, utilitarian ration, nothing like the loose, fragrant leaves kept in the porcelain jars back home. But as he pours the pale brown powder into the boiling water, the scent that rises on the steam is nothing short of miraculous. It is the smell of a quiet Sunday morning. It is the smell of a warm kitchen, of rain beating against a window pane, of a grandmother's soft, wrinkled hands passing a saucer across a wooden table. For a boy who has just walked through the deepest shadows of the world, that smell is a lifeline. It is a visceral, immediate reminder that civilization still exists, that comfort has not been entirely erased from the earth. Arthur reaches for the mug. The metal handle is hot, but his hands are shaking so violently that the hot liquid sloshes over the rim, spilling onto the sand. He cannot bring it to his lips without spilling the rest. The frustration brings a sudden, stinging heat to his eyes. He has survived the ocean, he has survived the beach, but he cannot manage to take a simple sip of tea. Edward sees this. He understands the profound vulnerability of this moment. He does not pity Arthur, he simply recognizes the heavy toll of the morning. Edward reaches out, his own hands bruised and coated in white chalk dust. He wraps his fingers gently but firmly over Arthur's trembling hands, entirely covering them. "I've got it," Edward whispers, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "Just take it slow. I've got you." Together, guided by Edward's steady strength, they lift the tin mug. Arthur leans forward, his lips touching the hot metal rim. He takes a sip. The liquid is scalding hot, fiercely sweet, and tastes heavily of the tin cup, but to Arthur, it is the most exquisite thing he has ever tasted. The warmth hits the back of his throat and travels slowly down into his chest, a glowing, spreading ember in the center of his being. He closes his eyes, leaning into the warmth, letting it radiate outward, pushing back against the deep, bone-chilling cold of the channel water that still clings to his skin. He takes another sip, longer this time. With Edward's hands holding his own, the violent trembling in Arthur's fingers slowly begins to subside. The heat of the tea and the human warmth of the friend beside him act as a powerful, quiet medicine. The tight, agonizing knot in his stomach begins to loosen. The rigid tension in his shoulders softens, causing him to slump slightly against the stone wall. "Good?" Edward asks softly, finally letting go of Arthur's hands as they steady. "Yeah," Arthur breathes out, a long, deeply satisfied sigh. "Yeah, it's perfect." He holds the mug out to Edward. It is an unspoken rule of the shoreline: nothing is kept for oneself. Comfort is meant to be shared. Edward takes the mug, wrapping his cold palms around the warm metal, and takes a long, slow drink. He closes his eyes, just as Arthur did, savoring the profound, simple normalcy of the act. Look up and down the winding edge of the wreckage. You will see this quiet, surreal scene repeating itself in dozens of hidden hollows and sheltered craters. Men sitting among the twisted iron and the broken earth, huddled over tiny, flickering flames. They are clinging to this ancient, domestic ritual to remind themselves that they are still human. The act of brewing tea in the midst of ruin is a quiet, beautiful rebellion. It is a refusal to let the chaos entirely consume their spirits. By insisting on this small comfort, by taking the time to boil the water and share the cup, they are planting a tiny flag of peace in the middle of a fractured landscape. A few yards away, leaning against the heavy wooden remains of a shattered glider, sits a boy named William. He holds his own warm tin cup in one hand. In the other, he holds a piece of pale pink stationery. The paper is soft, worn thin from being folded and unfolded countless times in the dark hold of the ship. William reads the graceful, looping cursive by the pale, flat light of the afternoon. It is a letter from his wife. She does not write of grand, sweeping global events. She writes about the garden they planted behind their small house. She tells him that the tomato vines are finally creeping up the wooden stakes he built for them before he left. She tells him that the stray cat he used to feed has finally come inside and sleeps on his favorite armchair. She tells him that the kitchen sink is dripping again, and she misses the way he used to hum while he fixed it. William takes a sip of his tea and reads the words again. He can see the green of the tomato vines. He can hear the soft, rhythmic drip of the faucet. The sheer, overwhelming normalcy of her words is an anchor. It pulls his mind away from the cold sand and the heavy gray sky, transporting him across the ocean to a quiet room filled with morning light. He rests his head back against the broken wood, the pink paper resting on his chest, the tin cup warming his hand. He is so tired, but the violent shaking has stopped. The tea has settled his nerves, and the letter has settled his heart. He is grounded. He knows exactly who he is, and exactly what he is waiting to return to. The small fuel tablets eventually burn down, turning into soft, white ash that is quickly scattered by the wind. The tiny flames extinguish, leaving the shoreline to the gray light and the cooling air. But the warmth they provided lingers. It remains trapped beneath the heavy wool jackets, resting deep in the chests of the men who shared the cups. Arthur and Edward sit quietly against the seawall. The tin mug is empty, sitting between them in the sand. Arthur looks down at his hands. They are dirty, bruised, and scratched, but they are still. The fluttering has passed. The sheer, physical shock of the morning has been gently washed away by the simple grace of a shared, warm drink. They do not need to move just yet. The world will demand their strength again soon enough, but for this one, suspended moment, they are allowed to just sit in the quiet aftermath. Let the soothing warmth of the tea spread through your own chest. Feel the solid, unyielding earth at your back, and the comforting presence of a friend sitting beside you. The wreckage surrounds them, a stark reminder of the crossing, but it cannot touch the quiet, radiant sanctuary they have built together in the sand. Rest your eyes. Listen to the steady, rhythmic breathing of the men around you. They have found their footing again. The trembling has ceased, replaced by a soft, enduring resilience, nurtured by the simple, beautiful act of sharing a quiet cup in the fading light of the longest day. Feel the soft, warm glow of a radio dial burning like a tiny, amber lighthouse in the quiet dark of a sleeping home. Thousands of miles away from the cold, churning waters of the Channel, an entirely different kind of vigil is taking place. Here, on the home front, the night is not filled with the roar of engines or the crashing of the tide. It is filled with a heavy, velvet silence. The streets of these towns and cities are deeply still, wrapped in the peaceful slumber of a late spring night. The elm trees sway gently in the warm breeze, casting long, familiar shadows across manicured lawns and empty sidewalks. It is a world that feels completely untouched by the metal and the mud of the continent, yet it is intimately, inextricably bound to it. Step inside a quiet living room. The house is dark, save for the single, golden light emanating from the wooden console radio in the corner. The glass dial glows with a soft, comforting warmth, illuminating the dust motes that dance slowly in the air. The tubes inside hum with a low, steady vibration, smelling faintly of warm dust and electricity. It is the altar of the modern home, the singular voice connecting the safe, quiet sanctuary of the living room to the vast, turbulent turning of the world. Sitting in a worn, floral armchair beside the radio is a young woman named Clara. She wears a soft, cotton robe pulled tightly around her shoulders against a chill that comes from within, not from the warm night air. She has not been sleeping well. For weeks, a heavy, unspoken anticipation has hung over the neighborhood, a collective holding of breath. Every wife, every mother, every father has felt it. The waiting is a physical weight, pressing down on the chest, making the quiet moments feel incredibly loud. Suddenly, the low murmur of the late-night music program fades away. There is a crackle of static, a brief, breathless pause, and then the announcer's voice fills the room. His tone is different tonight. It is stripped of its usual cheerful cadence. It is hushed, solemn, and trembling with the sheer weight of the words he is speaking. He announces that the great crossing has begun. Clara does not cry out. She does not move. The reaction to such monumental news in the quiet hours of the night is often a profound, absolute stillness. She simply closes her eyes, and her hands, resting in her lap, fold together so tightly that her knuckles turn white. Her heart drops, skipping a beat before settling into a fast, nervous rhythm. The abstract, distant concept of the war has suddenly materialized into this very specific, terrifying morning. She opens her eyes and looks around her living room. The contrast is almost too sharp to bear. The room is so perfectly normal, so utterly safe. The mantel clock ticks softly, a steady, domestic heartbeat. The lace doilies rest perfectly flat on the side tables. A pair of her husband's old leather slippers still sits tucked beneath the edge of the sofa, exactly where he left them months ago. It is a room built for Sunday papers, for quiet cups of tea, for the soft murmur of evening conversation. She stands up slowly and walks to the front window. She pulls the curtain back just a fraction. Outside, the world is asleep. A street lamp casts a warm, pooling circle of light onto the empty asphalt. A stray cat walks softly along the top of a wooden fence. The crickets are singing their ancient, rhythmic lullaby in the tall grass. How can the world be so perfectly peaceful here, when thousands of miles away, the man she loves is stepping into the freezing surf? She looks up at the moon, hanging pale and luminous in the night sky. It is the same moon. She realizes, with a sudden, aching clarity, that the light falling on her quiet street is the very same light reflecting off the dark waters of the Atlantic. The ocean is vast, and cold, and deep, but it is a shared body. It touches the shores of her home, and it touches the sands of Normandy. Clara walks over to a small, wooden desk resting against the wall. She opens the top drawer and pulls out a bundle of letters, tied neatly with a piece of blue ribbon. The envelopes are soft and worn at the edges from being handled so many times. She unties the ribbon and slides the top letter from its sleeve. She knows the words by heart, but she needs to see his handwriting. She needs to trace the looping curves of her name written in his ink. He had written this letter while sitting in a damp canvas tent in England, but he did not write about his fears. He wrote about the garden in their backyard. He asked if the hydrangeas had bloomed yet. He promised that as soon as he came home, he would finally fix the squeaky floorboard in the hallway that always woke the dog. She holds the paper to her chest. This piece of paper is a bridge. It is an invisible thread of pure, enduring devotion that stretches out of her living room, out across the dark, sleeping continent, across the vast expanse of the ocean, and ties itself directly to his heart. In this quiet, agonizing wait, she believes that if she simply holds onto this thread tightly enough, her love can act as a shield. It can be an anchor to keep him steady when the world around him shakes. As she stands there, holding the letter in the dim, golden light of the radio, she notices something out of the corner of her eye. Through the sheer fabric of the curtains, a square of yellow light suddenly blooms in the darkness. It is the window of the house right next door. A few moments later, across the street, another light clicks on. Then another, down at the end of the block. Clara is not alone. The midnight broadcast has traveled down the invisible airwaves, slipping through the cracks of windows and under doors, waking the neighborhood. In every one of those brightly lit windows, there is a Clara. There is a mother sitting at a kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cold mug of milk, staring blankly at the floral wallpaper. There is a father sitting in his study, the unlit pipe resting forgotten in his hand, listening to the static of the radio with his head bowed. They are a silent, scattered congregation, bound together by the profound, agonizing vulnerability of loving someone they cannot protect. Clara steps out onto her front porch. The air is cool and smells of dew and damp soil. The wooden floorboards creak softly beneath her slippers. From the porch next door, an older man named Mr. Abernathy steps out into the shadows. He wears a heavy woolen cardigan over his pajamas. He is a quiet man who spends his days tending to a meticulous rose garden. Both of his sons are somewhere over the dark water tonight. He looks across the short expanse of lawn that separates their houses. He sees Clara standing in the soft light pouring from her window. He does not wave. He simply walks slowly down his front steps, crosses the damp grass, and comes to stand at the bottom of Clara's porch. In his hands, he carries a small, battered metal thermos and 2 ceramic mugs. "I couldn't sleep," Mr. Abernathy whispers, his voice rough and soft, like dry leaves. "I heard the radio." "I heard it too," Clara answers, her voice trembling just slightly in the cool air. He climbs the steps and pours a measure of steaming, dark coffee into each mug. He hands one to Clara. The warmth of the ceramic instantly soothes her cold, shaking hands. They sit down together on the wooden steps of the porch. They do not discuss the news. They do not speak of beaches, or boats, or the vast machinery of the morning. To speak the fears aloud would be to give them too much power. Instead, they sit shoulder to shoulder in the dark, sipping the hot, bitter coffee, and they simply share the weight of the weight. "The roses are doing well this year, Mr. Abernathy," Clara murmurs, looking out at the dark shapes of the bushes in his yard. "They are," he replies softly, nodding his head. "Best blooms we've had in a long time. They'll be beautiful when the boys get back." It is a quiet, monumental act of everyday heroism. The courage to speak of tomorrow. The sheer, breathtaking resilience it takes to sit on a porch in the dark, terrified down to the marrow of your bones, and choose to talk about the blooming of flowers. They are refusing to let the darkness steal their hope. They are keeping the home fires burning, not with grand gestures, but with quiet, stubborn acts of normalcy. Slowly, the deep blue of the night sky begins to soften. The stars fade, giving way to the pale, milky light of the dawn. The birds in the elm trees begin to sing their chaotic, joyful morning songs. The world is waking up. A heavy, green truck rumbles slowly down the street, the milkman making his usual rounds, the glass bottles clinking cheerfully in their wire carriers. A folded newspaper lands with a soft thud on the driveway. The sun breaks over the horizon, casting long, golden rays across the dewy lawns. It feels almost surreal that the sun should rise so beautifully, so indifferently, on a day like today. But the morning demands to be met. Clara finishes her coffee. She stands up, the soft fabric of her robe brushing against the wood. She looks at Mr. Abernathy, who offers her a small, tight, incredibly brave smile. She smiles back, an acknowledgement of this shared, silent vigil. She walks back inside her house. The radio is still murmuring in the corner, a constant, tethering voice. But Clara does not sit back down in the armchair. She walks into the kitchen. She ties an apron around her waist. She turns on the faucet, fills the kettle with fresh water, and sets it on the stove to boil. She begins to measure out flour and sugar into a heavy ceramic bowl. Her hands move with the practiced, rhythmic grace of countless mornings before. She is going to bake bread. This is the quiet resilience of the home front. When the world feels entirely out of control, when the ones you love most are entirely out of your reach, you turn to the things you can control. You sweep the porch. You fold the laundry. You knead the dough. These small, domestic chores become a form of prayer. They are the physical manifestation of hope. By maintaining the sanctuary of the home, by keeping the routines alive, they are holding a space open for their men to return to. Listen to the rhythmic thud of Clara's hands kneading the heavy dough against the wooden counter. It is a slow, methodical sound. With every push, every fold, she is weaving her love into the very fabric of the day. Think of the millions of living rooms just like this one. Millions of glowing radio dials. Millions of women and men moving quietly through their kitchens in the early morning light, carrying an invisible, crushing weight with absolute, breathtaking grace. They cannot climb the cliffs. They cannot wade through the cold surf. But they are walking every single step of the journey in their hearts. The echoes of the morning cross the ocean not in the form of loud thunder, but in the quiet, steady hum of the radio, and the soft, enduring beat of the human heart. The Atlantic is wide, and the wait will be agonizingly long, but the threads of love pulling across the dark water are stronger than the sea. Let the warm light of the living room soothe you. Let the soft, ticking clock rock your thoughts to stillness. The men are on the beaches, but they are not alone. They are anchored by the quiet, radiant devotion burning in the windows of home, a guiding light waiting patiently in the dawn. Watch the fiery edge of the sun finally slip beneath the bruised horizon, taking the longest day of the world away with it. The sky, which has been a canvas of heavy gray and frantic motion since the early hours of the dawn, is now painted in soft, forgiving shades of lavender, dusty rose, and deep, quiet indigo. The light is changing, softening the sharp edges of the landscape. The shadows cast by the ancient stone walls and the twisted, shattered wood on the beaches stretch out long and thin, reaching across the grass like weary arms seeking rest. The wind, which howled across the channel all morning, has dropped to a gentle, exhausted whisper, rustling the leaves of the apple orchards with a sound like a quiet sigh. Everywhere across this newly won edge of the continent, a profound, heavy stillness is settling in. The men who walked out of the ocean and climbed the sheer stone cliffs are finally stopping. They move with an incredible, slow-motion grace, their limbs weighed down by a fatigue so deep it touches the very marrow of their bones. The adrenaline that propelled them forward, that shielded them from the cold and the fear, has completely evaporated. What is left is simply the beautiful, fragile human body, asking for the grace of the earth. Listen to the soft, rhythmic scrape of small metal shovels biting into the soil. They are not digging frantically. There is a peaceful, methodical rhythm to their work. They are carving out small, shallow spaces in the ground, making temporary homes in the dirt. For a young man named Peter, whose hands are blistered and caked with the white dust of the cliffs, this soil feels like an old friend. He grew up turning the dark, rich earth of a Midwestern farm. As he clears a space beneath the sweeping branches of an oak tree, the smell of the turned dirt, damp, sweet, and full of life, brings a sudden, unexpected comfort. It smells like the fields after a spring rain. He smooths the bottom of the shallow trench, patting the earth down with his palms, asking the ground to hold him gently for the night. Next to him, a boy from the busy streets of a distant city is sitting on his heavy steel helmet, his head bowed. Slowly, agonizingly, he unlaces his wet leather boots. They are soaked through, stiff with salt water and mud. When he finally pulls them off, he lets out a long, shuddering breath. The simple, physical relief for freeing his aching feet is a tiny, beautiful miracle. He massages his cold toes, rubbing the circulation back into his skin. From the shadows, Peter reaches into his own canvas pack. He pulls out a pair of thick, gray wool socks. They are entirely dry. He hasn't worn them yet. He holds them out to the city boy. No grand words are spoken. The city boy looks at the dry socks, and then up at Peter, his eyes shining with a gratitude that cannot be captured in language. In this damp, cold twilight, a pair of dry socks is a treasure beyond measure. It is a profound, quiet act of love. The boy pulls the drywall over his freezing feet, and a visible wave of comfort washes over him. He leans back against the dirt wall of the trench, closing his eyes, anchored by the warmth of a stranger's kindness. As the lavender sky deepens into the velvet purple of dusk, the light becomes precious. Men are using these final, fading rays of the sun to perform one last, sacred ritual. All across the fields and hedgerows, small squares of paper are being unfolded. Tucked inside a damp pocket, resting against a beating heart, is a letter. A soldier holds the delicate, creased paper up toward the western horizon, catching the last of the light. He reads the words he has already memorized, just to see the shape of the handwriting one more time before the dark sets in. He traces the ink with a dirty, trembling finger. It is a letter from his mother, telling him about the quiet, ordinary things that make up the world he left behind. She tells him that the front porch has been painted, that the dog still waits for him by the gate, that his room is exactly as he left it. He reads the closing line, "I am keeping the light on for you." He smiles, a soft, weary smile that smooths away the harsh lines of the day. He carefully folds the paper, wrapping it back in its protective oilcloth, and tucks it safely back into his pocket. He has touched home, just for a moment, in the twilight of Normandy. A little further down the line, sitting on the edge of a grassy knoll, is a medic. His canvas bag, filled with bandages and quiet mercy, rests on the ground beside him. His hands are stained with the heavy cost of the morning. He reaches for his metal canteen, pours a small splash of cool water over his fingers, and washes them in the grass. He tilts his head back, resting it against the trunk of a tree, and looks up. Through the canopy of leaves, the first star of the evening is pressing its way through the darkening sky. It is a tiny, fragile pinprick of silver light. The medic watches it, his breathing slowing down to match the peaceful rhythm of the evening. He has spent the entire day pouring his own strength into the broken bodies of others, whispering soothing words into the storm. Now, the sky is offering him that same quiet comfort. The star does not ask anything of him. It simply shines, a quiet guardian watching over the resting fields. Listen to the sounds of the camp settling down. The frantic noises of the day have been replaced by the soft, domestic murmurs of a makeshift community. The clinking of a metal spoon against a tin can as a soldier eats cold rations. The scratch of a match flaring briefly to light a final, shared cigarette, the small orange cherry glowing like a firefly in the dark. The low, hushed whispers of men talking to each other, their voices barely carrying over the breeze. They do not talk of the morning. They talk of the meals they will eat when they get back, of the girls they left behind, of the simple, beautiful dream of a soft mattress and clean sheets. The air grows cold as the sun finally vanishes, bringing a damp chill that rolls on off the ocean. The men pull their heavy wool blankets from their packs. The blankets are rough and smell of damp sheep in storage, but they are shields against the night. They wrap themselves tightly, pulling the wool up to their chins, turning up the collars of their jackets. In the shallow trenches and the hollows of the earth, they do not sleep alone. They huddle together, pressing their backs against one another. It is a practical choice for warmth, but it is also a deep, instinctual need for connection. To feel the steady, rhythmic breathing of a brother against your own spine is to know that you are safe. It is a physical promise that someone is there, that you have not been left alone in the dark. When one man shifts in his sleep, the other shifts with him, a quiet, synchronized dance of survival and comfort. In the distance, the ocean continues its eternal work. The tide is coming back in, washing over the gray sand, smoothing out the footprints, gently carrying away the remnants of the longest day. The sound of the waves breaking against the shore is no longer a roar of chaos. It is a steady, rhythmic sigh. Hush. 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 It is the oldest lullaby in the world, sung by the sea to the weary children resting on its shores. Let yourself sink down into the quiet earth alongside them. Feel the soft, damp grass beneath your cheek. Feel the heavy, comforting weight of the wool blanket wrapping around your shoulders. The frantic racing of the heart has finally slowed, replaced by a deep, resonant calm. The longest day has asked for everything they had, and they have given it. There is nothing left to do now but rest. A profound, beautiful peace settles over the Normandy coast. The twilight deepens into a true, protective night. The shadows merge into one vast, quiet blanket covering the fields, the ancient walls, and the sleeping men. Their faces, so pale and frightened in the morning light, are now completely relaxed, softened by the dark and the sweet grace of sleep. The wind whispers softly through the apple trees, a gentle blessing for the brave. Allow the heavy, quiet peace of the evening to wash over you. The day is done. The earth is holding them safe. And under the watchful, shimmering canopy of 1,000 silver stars, they finally, beautifully, allow themselves to breathe. Listen to the wind, moving softly across the quieted sand, whispering a gentle lullaby to those who have found their eternal rest. The heavy, rushing tide of the morning has receded, and the great, chaotic storm has pushed far inland, leaving the shoreline wrapped in a profound and holy silence. The sky above is vast and pale, a sweeping canopy of forgiving light that casts no harsh shadows upon the earth. Here, along the edge of the water and in the quiet, green hollows of the fields, time has gently stopped. The young men who lie resting in the sand are no longer bound by the ticking of the clock or the heavy demands of the day. They have slipped off the heavy boots of the world and surrendered to a deep, unbroken sleep. Moving slowly among them, stepping with infinite care, are a few quiet figures. They are chaplains and medics, men whose only remaining duty is one of absolute, tender reverence. They do not carry weapons. They carry small canvas bags and a boundless, aching compassion. Their movements are not the sharp, hurried actions of the morning, they are the slow, deliberate motions of a sacred ritual. Watch a gentleman with silver at his temples kneel in the soft sand beside a sleeping boy. He does not see a fallen soldier, he sees a beloved son. He reaches out his hand and rests it softly on the boy's shoulder for just a moment, a silent, deeply human acknowledgement of the life that was given. Then, with fingers that are remarkably light and steady, he begins the solemn gathering. He carefully unbuttons the damp wool of the breast pocket. This is not a military search, it is a gathering of the soul. He is looking for the small, fragile things that tethered this boy to the earth. From the pocket, he draws out a handful of ordinary miracles. There is a small, silver pocket knife with a worn bone handle, the kind a grandfather might carve a wooden whistle with on a summer afternoon. There is a lucky silver coin, its face rubbed entirely smooth by nervous thumbs in the dark hold of a ship. There is a tiny, black and white photograph, curled at the edges, showing a smiling girl standing on a wooden porch, squinting happily into the sun. The chaplain holds these items in the palm of his hand. They are so impossibly light, yet they carry the entire, beautiful weight of a human life. He places them gently into a small, cloth envelope. He is not just gathering personal effects, he is gathering the boy's memories. He is making sure that the things this boy loved are not left behind to the wind and the salt. And then, his fingers brush against something else, tucked deep inside the inner lining of the jacket. It is a square of folded paper, wrapped carefully in a scrap of waterproof oilcloth. It is a letter. The chaplain slowly unwraps the cloth. The paper inside is slightly damp from the sea air, but it is intact. It is written on pale blue stationery, the kind handed out by the thousands in the quiet English camps before the crossing. The ink is a deep navy, flowing in a hurried, slanted cursive. It was written in the flickering, golden light of a canvas tent, while rain beat softly against the roof and the world held its breath. This letter was never placed in a mailbag. It was never carried across the water by a postman. It was carried across the channel over the beating heart of the boy who wrote it. It was his shield, his comfort, his final conversation with the world he was leaving behind. The chaplain does not read the letter out of curiosity. He looks at the first few lines only to find a name, an address, a place to send this precious piece of a soul. But as his eyes brush over the words, he feels the profound, enduring warmth trapped within the ink. Dear Mother, the letter begins. The rain has finally stopped here. They say the weather might clear up soon. Please don't worry about me. I have my heavy coat, and the food is fine. The words are so simple, so wonderfully, heartbreakingly ordinary. In the hours before he stepped into the greatest, most terrifying unknown in the history of the world, this boy did not write about courage, or fear, or the grand sweep of nations. He wrote to comfort his mother. He wrapped his love around her in the form of a lie about being warm and well-fed. He tried to project a calm he likely did not feel, just to spare her a single moment of unnecessary pain. Tell Jimmy he can use my bicycle while I'm gone, the ink continues, tracing a line across the pale blue page. But tell him he has to keep the chain oiled. And let the dog sleep on the rug by the stove if it gets cold. The chaplain traces the edge of the paper with his thumb. In these fragile, looping lines, the boy has preserved his entire universe. He has captured the squeak of the bicycle tires on a paved road. He has captured the smell of wet fur and the warmth of the kitchen stove. He has folded his home into a tiny square of paper and carried it into the dark. This piece of paper is a time capsule, a vessel of eternal youth. The boy resting in the sand will never grow old. He will never know the slow ache of passing years, the graying of hair, or the quiet fading of the seasons. He will forever remain exactly as he was in the moment he sealed this envelope, 20 years old, full of quiet bravery, worrying about his brother's bicycle and his mother's heart. His youth, his innocence, and his boundless capacity for love are permanently trapped in the fibers of this page. The chaplain gently refolds the letter, ensuring the creases meet exactly as the boy had intended. He slips it into the cloth envelope alongside the silver coin and the photograph. He seals it, marking it with a name and a destination. Imagine the journey this small envelope is about to take. It will travel back across the vast, dark expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. It will ride on trains across sweeping plains and through quiet, sleeping mountains. It will be carried up a concrete walkway, past a blooming garden, and handed to a woman standing behind a screen door. When she opens the envelope and holds that piece of pale blue paper, she will not be holding a casualty report. She will be holding her son. She will touch the paper, feeling the slight indentation of his pen pressing into the page. She will see the place where he crossed out a word and rewrote it, a tiny, beautiful hesitation of his mind. She will bring the paper to her face, searching for the faint, lingering scent of canvas, of tobacco, of the sea. This letter will become a holy relic in a quiet house. It will be kept in a small, wooden cedar box on a dresser, resting next to a dried rose or a lock of childhood hair. Over the years, the paper will grow incredibly soft, worn thin like ancient silk by the touch of a mother's fingertips. She will read it when the house is too quiet. She will read it on the days when the snow falls softly against the window pane. She will read it until the words are a permanent song in her mind. And through this letter, the boy will continue to speak. His love will not end on the shores of Normandy. It will echo across the decades, a gentle, enduring whisper that says, I loved you. I thought of you. I carried you with me to the very edge of the world. All along the quiet beach and up into the deep green shadows of the hedgerows, this solemn gathering continues. Small, canvas bags are filled with these fragile testaments of love. There is a letter to a young wife, promising to build the porch swing they had talked about, promising to dance with her in the kitchen again. There is a hastily scribbled note to a father, expressing a quiet pride, hoping he has made the old man proud. There are unfinished sentences, thoughts trailing off as the order to move was given, the pen capped, the paper folded in a rush. The incompleteness of an unfinished letter is not a tragedy, it is a beautiful, lingering bridge. It means the thought was still reaching out, still pointing toward home, right up until the very end. The love was not interrupted, it simply transitioned from ink on paper to a permanent, invisible presence in the air. The men who walk the fields, gathering these pieces of paper, move with a profound, aching gentleness. They understand the immense responsibility of their task. They are the guardians of final thoughts. They are the postmen of the quieted soul. When a medic finds a letter tucked into a helmet band, he wipes the sand from it as if he is wiping a tear from a cheek. He handles the paper as if it were spun from glass, knowing that the words written there are more powerful, more enduring, than any weapon ever forged. The sun begins to warm the sand, casting a soft, golden glow over the resting coast. The tide murmurs softly against the shore, a slow, rhythmic breathing of the earth. The sky is endless and peaceful. Let the image of these folded pieces of paper rest gently in your mind. They are the ultimate proof of our humanity. In the midst of unimaginable noise and overwhelming darkness, what these young men chose to do was to reach for a pen. They chose to write of gardens, and bicycles, and kitchen stoves. They chose to send their love backward across the ocean, a radiant light pushing against the dark. The letters never sent from the beaches of Normandy are not lost. They are found, and they are carried, and they are kept. They are the quiet, enduring heartbeat of the fallen. Rest here in the soft light of the morning. Listen to the wind moving gently through the tall grass. Feel the enduring warmth of a love that transcends time and space and even life itself. The ink may fade, the paper may soften, but the quiet, beautiful devotion written in the dark will never, ever be washed away. Let the peace of this realization settle over you, a warm, protective blanket, and know that every word of love spoken in the shadows eventually finds its way home. Stand at the edge of the water today, and listen to the rhythmic, breathing silence of a world entirely at peace. The sand beneath your feet is no longer the gray, ash-colored shore of a heavy morning. It is warm, golden, and incredibly soft, yielding gently to the weight of your step. The English Channel, once a formidable, churning barrier of dark water and cold spray, now laps quietly at the shoreline. It rolls in with a soft, forgiving whisper, a delicate lace of white sea foam spreading over the wet earth before slowly pulling back into the deep. The air smells intensely of sweet seagrass, of salt, and of the warm sunshine baking the ancient stones of the seawall. It is a beautiful, deeply comforting place. If you walk along the water's edge today, you will not find the heavy wreckage of the past. The earth is a miraculous, forgiving entity. Over the decades, the ocean and the wind have worked together, a tireless pair of gentle hands, smoothing away the deep scars of the shoreline. The twisted iron and shattered would have long since been swallowed by the sea or reclaimed by the land. In their place, delicate coastal flowers bloom in the sand dunes. Small, yellow petals tremble in the light sea breeze, clinging to the deep green stalks of the beach grass. Swallows dip and dive in the clear blue sky, their songs bright and entirely free of fear. Watch the shoreline for just a little while. You will see a young couple walking barefoot through the shallow surf, their hands comfortably interlaced. You will see a small child, a bright red bucket in hand, laughing as a tiny wave rushes up to tickle their toes. They leave a trail of shallow footprints behind them in the wet sand. But soon, the ancient clock of the ocean turns. The tide begins to rise, inching its way up the beach. With a soft, sweeping motion, the water washes over the footprints, smoothing the sand back into a flawless, perfect mirror reflecting the open sky. It is a beautiful cycle of renewal. The sea takes away the marks of the day, leaving the canvas clean for tomorrow. But even as the footprints of today are washed away, the wind moving across the long stretch of the coast remembers. If you close your eyes and turn your face to the breeze, you can almost feel the gentle weight of the memory it carries. The wind remembers the heavy boots that once stepped onto this shore from the cold water. It remembers the frantic, shallow breaths of the boys who sought shelter in the dunes. It remembers the incredible, breathtaking courage of ordinary men who walked into the dark so that these children could play in the light. Walk slowly away from the gentle surf and turn your steps inland. Follow the narrow, sandy paths that wind their way up the gentle slopes and through the thick, green hedgerows. The climb is no longer a desperate struggle against sheer rock and slipping mud. It is a peaceful, winding walk through a landscape that has entirely healed itself. The thick canopy of the ancient oak trees filters the sunlight, casting dancing, golden shadows across the path. The air here is still and smells of crushed clover and rich, dark soil. At the top of the bluffs, resting on a wide, green plateau that overlooks the endless sweep of the ocean, there is a garden. Step softly through the wrought iron gates, and feel the sudden, profound hush that falls over the world. It is a silence so thick, so deeply respectful, that it feels like a physical embrace. Here, planted in the meticulously manicured, emerald grass, are thousands upon thousands of perfectly white marble stones. They stand in immaculate, sweeping rows, curving gently across the earth like a vast, silent choir at rest. The marble catches the bright afternoon sunlight, glowing with a soft, radiant warmth against the green of the earth and the blue of the sea. These stones are not cold monuments to a distant, abstract history. They are the resting places of boys who loved and were deeply loved in return. Walk slowly down one of these quiet rows. Let your fingers lightly brush the top of a sun-warmed stone. Feel the solid, enduring strength of the marble. Beneath this earth lies a boy from a dusty prairie town who loved the smell of rain on dry grass. Beneath the next stone lies a young man from a bustling city who worked in a bakery and loved the quiet hours of the early morning. Beside him rests a father who carried a folded photograph of a newborn daughter in his breast pocket, a daughter he never had the chance to hold. They are gathered here together, a brotherhood resting eternally side by side, perfectly safe from the wind and the cold. They are no longer tired. They are no longer frightened. The heavy canvas packs and the wet wool uniforms have been traded for the soft, protective blanket of the Normandy earth. Picture an older woman walking slowly along the edge of the grass. Her silver hair blows gently in the coastal breeze. She stops before a specific white cross. She does not weep with the frantic, tearing grief of the past. Her tears are soft, silent, and deeply, deeply weathered by time. She reaches out a frail, trembling hand and traces the letters carved into the marble. She remembers the boy who used to build wooden airplanes on the kitchen table. She remembers the way he laughed when the dog chased its own tail. She reaches into her coat and places a single, perfect red rose at the base of the stone. The connection between her hand and that stone bridges the vast expanse of time. The love she holds for him did not fade when the telegram arrived decades ago. It did not wash away with the tide. It endured. It grew softer, perhaps, settling into a deep, quiet ache in the corner of her heart, but it never left. The love trapped in the unread letters, the silent promises made in the holds of the transport ships, the final thoughts sent backward across the ocean, all of it remains here, woven inextricably into the grass and the wind. What is the true measure of the gift these boys gave to the world? It is not found in the grand, sweeping lines of history books or the heavy bronze statues in city squares. The true measure of their sacrifice is found in the gloriously mundane, incredibly beautiful peace of the present moment. It is found in the fact that a family can sit around a wooden table and share a meal without listening to the sky with dread. It is found in the quiet ticking of a clock in a safe, warm living room. It is found in the absolute, radiant freedom of a child flying a paper kite on this very beach, the string pulling taut against the same wind that once carried the sound of the crossing. They gave up their own tomorrows, their own chances to build houses, to plant gardens, to sit on front porches in the evening light, so that the world could simply have its today. They laid down their lives not for glory, but for the profound, beautiful right of others to live entirely ordinary, peaceful lives. As the afternoon begins to wane, the light across the cemetery turns from a bright, brilliant gold to a soft, dusty peach. The shadows of the white marble stones stretch out long and thin across the manicured grass, a gentle sundial marking the end of another quiet day. The birds begin to quiet their songs, settling into the branches of the oak trees for the night. The air cools, carrying the fresh, clean scent of the evening sea. Stand at the edge of the bluff and look out over the water. The horizon is a soft, blurred line where the lavender sky meets the deep indigo of the ocean. The vastness of the water is a comforting reminder of the sheer scale of the earth, a world that is large enough to hold all of our sorrows and all of our joys. In the distance, down the coastline, a small lighthouse clicks on. A single, sweeping beam of golden light reaches out across the darkening water. It is a guardian of the night, a silent promise that the way is safe, that the hazards have been marked, and that the shore will always be there to welcome the weary traveler home. The boys resting in the grass behind you are like that light. Their memory is a beacon that cuts through the darkness of the world. By remembering them, by coming to this quiet place and whispering their names to the wind, we keep that light burning. We honor their immense, quiet courage by living our own lives with gentleness, with gratitude, and with a profound appreciation for the peace they bought at such an incredibly heavy cost. The tide is retreating now, pulling far back from the sandy shore, revealing the smooth, dark stones and the small, hidden pools of water left behind in the hollows. The ocean is exhaling, a long, slow breath out into the universe. Let your own breathing match the rhythm of the sea. Breathe in the cool, clean evening air. Hold it for just a moment, feeling the stillness of the world around you. And then breathe out, letting go of the tension in your shoulders, the worry in your mind, the heavy burdens of your own day. The longest day is entirely a memory now. The storm has passed, and it will not return to this shore. The earth is safe, and the night is a protective, comforting blanket falling softly over the fields and the sea. Listen to the hush of the waves. It is a continuous, soothing lullaby. You are safe, the water whispers against the stones. You are free. Rest now. Allow the quiet beauty of the retreating tide to wash over you, clearing away the noise and the light, leaving only a deep, abiding stillness in your soul. The white stones glow softly in the twilight, a silent vigil kept by those who have already given their everything. They are resting in perfect peace, cradled by the earth and remembered by the wind. Let their peace become your peace. Close your eyes, let the soft, enduring sounds of the Normandy coast gently carry you away, and simply allow yourself to drift into a long, quiet, and beautiful sleep.